Okay. It says go live in the streaming software, and I'm just, yeah, YouTube says live as well. So looks like we are live. Welcome everyone for another edition of the Tech Poutine with Potato and Cheese. I'm Potato.
And I'm Cheese.
Um, and we save gravy for the guests. If the guests come along, then we get gravy. For the first, we'll just let people wander in, make sure we've got our setup going well, shoot the hay. Oh, I've got an email saying I'm now live on YouTube. That's great. The system works. The system
Awesome.
works. We missed doing a tech routine last week. That was a mixture because I was on a mini vacation, sorting out the time. Technically, I'm still on the road. I wonder if you can guess where I am. And yeah,
Secrets.
let us know in the comment section if you can hear us fine, that you can see us fine. We have an interesting show for you today, which is kind of, I guess it's the preview show to next week. Really.
Yeah.
Next week is the big one. This is HotChips, one of the biggest one of our shows of the year for both you and I.
Um.
Is it the first show you went to?
No, this is going to be my second. So.
No, I mean the first ever industry show.
Um. No, I went to um. Uh.
Computex first, or
Computex. Yeah. No. Yeah. Computex. Technically, there was an
oh,
optical compute one.
OPLC.
Yes. In San Diego that I went to. That
Mm,
was technically my first, but I don't really count that. Computex was my first.
mm.
Um, and then after that, it was DAC, um, and
Oh yeah, yeah. DAC
the other
Semicon
one
West, and then
where Frontier lost my baggage. That was so much fun.
a supercomputer lost your baggage.
uh, hey,
Yeah,
if they had lost it, they may have been able to compute where to find it.
that's why. Yeah, I say this is why you should have AirTags, but I don't have AirTags on mine. I'm not part of the Apple ecosystem. But the okay, so you'd already done a few, but I think out of the first tranche, the optical OPLC, I think it is, or OPCP or
Mm-hmm.
something.
I think
Um,
it's OPC.
yeah, OPC is a conference that I think is going to be more interesting every year. I should have gone this year, not only because one of my newest clients is, in that field, but also the whole point about chip-to-chip connectivity with optics and the magical world of optics is changing so much. It's got to be something I think people should pay attention to, um, at least from a networking standpoint. The whole thing right now is we're spending too much power moving data. But if you have a chip, if you have the right packaging, perhaps you can communicate from compute to memory in optics,
Mm-hmm.
not only
That would be
electrical.
very neat.
It would be amazing high bandwidth. The question is, does it work at a latency that's worthwhile? So,
Yeah, your latency, of course, is not in the speed of light. It's going to be in your translation.
conversion. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in how fast can you make a signal go from optical to electrical and vice versa, right?
Yeah. And yeah, there's also questions there about depending on which method you use, maybe it's too big, or maybe there's thermal considerations, as in,
And Ian's gone. So looks like uh Yeah. Jordan in the chat says you can overcome a lot of the issues with redrivers, especially as you move to PCIe Gen 6 and forward. But yeah, I could see the latency and the conversion being a challenge. Welcome back, Ian.
It's my Chrome window just says, make sure you're connected to the internet. And I'm like, wait, what? Wait, what? So, yeah, it also doesn't help that I'm in control of the admin panel. So,
yes, yes,
if I drop, then my image drops and George will take over. It's the fact that we're both on Pacific time is the reason why we're doing it at this time today. I had a few meetings this morning and that I took because they paid well, and so I asked George to wait until later in the day. Which means, yeah, it's a bit rough for the European audience, but it's still available on catch up, and we're gonna start extracting some shorts from our conversations because everybody knows that George and I can be adequately opinionated on certain things.
yes.
I think we're going to have an argument this show as well, and
Well,
the
should we move to our main
well.
topics?
Well, we can do an official begin. So the way we're gonna do this is first of all we're going to speak about the HotChips conference. As I mentioned earlier, one of our favorite conferences of the year. They're very detailed, lots of very smart people in attendance, and we'll go into that. We'll go through each of the talks and what we expect to see. We have been briefed on a few of them, so we're going to be very careful about what we say. And if I have
Yes.
to mute George, I will. I have that power. It's
uh,
fine.
I promise I won't say anything. I am good boy.
And then in the second half of this, we're going to speak about the Zen 5 reviews, speak about what we've seen, what other people have reported, and some of the newest updates. And I've literally got an update as of 20 minutes ago that we can talk about that's been published in the media. So that's going to be fun. And as I mentioned, I am at the Jim Keller Company. I did speak to him yesterday for half an hour, off the record, of course. It was annoying because I had a briefing at that time. I got 2 minutes into the briefing. It was a group briefing, and Jim walks in the door. I was like, "Oh, hey, Jim," and I closed my laptop so I could speak to him rather than take the briefing on my laptop. So if he comes in, I'll hand him a microphone and see if he actually wants to talk. And now I'm paranoid that he's actually going to walk behind me. That being said, I've essentially been in the Tennis Torrent office for a couple of days. Part of my work these days is doing consultancy. But here there was at least a couple of interns saying, "I can't believe you're here. I'm doing an internship with Tennis Torrent because I've heard about the company through your videos, and I'm sure not just through mine, but." I wonder if they're going to hear and see this and get the notification. I'll see them jumping up and down. Luckily, I'm running Meteor Lake, so they do the edge blurring with the NPU. Ooh, AI PC. Yeah, except when my Chrome Windows crash. So that's fun.
Maybe they should AI the Chrome windows.
And then next week, because George and I are both at HotChips, we've got a studio booked with one of our partners in the area. That's going to have a big green screen, a proper studio, and we're going to do a tech poutine there. And we may get a gravy. We may get a guest. There's a few other content creators I want to bring on, and we'll see how malleable they are to me shoving them in a seat with a camera pointed in their fizzog and go, answer my questions. Because that's what we do as interviewers. So let's get this show on the road. Let me change our banner and we can do an intro. I need to create a banner. because I haven't prepared.
Can you tell that this was very off the cuff,
Ad hoc, yes.
ad hoc?
So, welcome everyone. You are here for episode 3 of the Tech Poutine, the tastiest show on the internet, starring me, Potato,
And me, cheese.
and we save the gravy for the guests. No planned guest for this show, unfortunately. If you're here for the pre-show, you may have heard us talk about Jim Keller because I just happened to be in Tense Torrent's office. And that's, well, that may not be the final plug. They're not sponsoring this episode. I'm just here in their offices and using their internet. So I guess that's a form of sponsorship. Today's episode is almost a preview episode of what's happening next week. I'm in San Francisco Bay Area primarily for HotChips. HotChips is a conference we all love. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, if you've read George's stuff over at chipsandcheese.com, go like and subscribe to his stuff. We like the conference because it's very deep, very technical, and the engineers there like talking about what they're doing. I know I've got a few interviews planned for the people at the show. George is trying to score some as well. Unfortunately, it's very dense, the conference as well.
Indeed.
There used to be a time where HotChips, there's 4 or 5 sessions each day. Each session is about 3 talks on average.
Mm-hmm.
You used to be able to sit out 1 or 2 of the sessions, so you could go around the posters, go around the booths and whatever. The last 2 or 3 years, no. Every session you have to be there because it's all really interesting and important. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting, and we're going to go through the conference schedule as currently posted online. It may change before then. It has been known to change in the last minute, but we will be talking about it. So, George, this is your second HotChips in person?
Yes.
Third?
This will be my second in person, third, actually, no, fourth total. The first 2 were on internet.
Yeah, HotChips was one of the last conferences to actually have an in-person element. That's partly because the place they used to host it was no longer viable for human existence because of earthquakes, as in it wasn't structurally sound in case there was one. Benefit of Bay Area, so they had to move it to Stanford. They also were taking a lot of precautions. HotChips is quite risk averse, for good, for bad. It is what it is, but it does mean that they are doing online and in-person components. I highly recommend in-person, just because it is an experience. If you are a student,
face-to-face is so needed.
Yeah. If you are a student, or I think if you're a student, there are heavy discounts. I think there's also discounts if you're an IEEE member. Again, this isn't a plug. This is just what happens. So this is the first. So do you want to explain the process of the HotChips conference? The fact there's tutorial day 1 and stuff.
So there's sort of tutorials day 1, which are last year was they're normally focused on 2 topics. Last year was compute and memory and CXL, if I remember correctly. This year it appears to be AI assisted hardware design and cooling. Those seem to be the 2.
Sorry, I think what I wanted you to go through is just talk about the conference layout.
Oh, I mean, I think last year, because of all the changes that had to happen, it was a bit different. So you were basically, we were all in just one big conference room.
No,
so it was
that's standard.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes. So okay. What I wanted you to say was day 0 on the Sunday is tutorials. They cost extra, and it's literally 2 tutorials across the day, and we'll get into those in a second. And then you have day 1, day 2, Monday, Tuesday. Talks start at 8 a.m.
Yes.
Pretty much, and they go until 7 p.m. pretty much. And
6. on the
6:45.
last day. Yeah.
It's every year they ask us, what do you want us to do better? And I keep telling them, do 3 days. Give us more bio breaks.
Yeah, that would be
Because they're dense, right? It's
yeah.
uh, one trend I've seen. So in terms of numbers, right? Pre-pandemic, it went from say like 1,200 up to 1,500, 1,600. Then during the pandemic, because it was all online, they went to about 2,500 to 2,800 because now people can access it
Mhm.
online live. You still have to pay, but it was like an online fee. And then when they went back to in person, they went hybrid, and I think combined hybrid was about 23, 2,400.
Hmm.
But in person was still a good 12, 1,300. There seems to be a preference for not necessarily increasing the number of attendees. They don't want it to get too big because they feel like if it gets too big, then it starts to become a pay to play. This is one of the few conferences that absolutely declare that it doesn't matter who's sponsoring it. So, I mean, they've got all these sponsors. Sponsorship guarantees you no talk. Most conferences, if you're a platinum or a rhodium sponsor, you get a keynote. This time around, no. You have to go. You have to send the paper, get it on merit. So, and then all these little companies, they'll all have booths. I keep threatening myself every year that we're going to have a Tech Potato sponsorship. I need to double check the prices and get more business. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, so it's actually been a couple of weeks since I've seen the schedule. So let's go through it. I don't know how many of these people you know, George, but do you want to take us through
So uh,
day zero?
so day zero, I don't think I actually know anyone on day zero who's presenting. Um, but so the first one, of course, you have to have the introduction, the sort of this is HotChips and all the sort of laying out of everything. Great. Moving on to the first sort of talk of the first tutorial, introduction to AI for chip design. So this is using AI to assist with, say, RTL layout or potentially with manufacturing and speeding up manufacturing um, processes.
It's being presented by the guy from a guy from
NVIDIA.
NVIDIA, Mark Wren. Excuse me. NVIDIA's been one of the major outspoken proponents of implementing. It says AI. It's machine learning, right? It's machine learning in chip design, and their claim is they have a lot of custom tools that others don't have access to, and they can benefit from that. But the point of tutorials is it's meant to be a more holistic overview, right? An introduction. What does it mean? I guarantee 90% of the engineers in the room are very familiar with a traditional design model. You know, how do
Mm-hmm.
we go build a chip? And the question is, what can machine learning do to help? I know a lot of people who get stuck in their ways.
That's
Right.
very common everywhere. I not just this industry, but all industries.
There are BIOS engineers at the big four motherboard companies who have been there 40 years who still run 1024 by 768 4x3 CRTs. And you wonder why the BIOS doesn't work. That aside, that aside,
Very
um,
true.
yeah, it's important. I think to a certain extent. I mean, I never know where to gauge the audience of Tech Potato when it comes to chip design. I always found, even as an early career journalist, the coverage of EDA, electronic design automation, how to build a chip, unless you were in the inner circle, there was nothing, right? You had to
Mm-hmm.
have a passion for it to go down that route.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like it's more the audience
It's
is more educated in general,
y-
so it
yeah.
becomes a more accessible discussion point of, oh, what is EDA? What is chip
Mhm.
design? Um,
And that's something that I have to admit I don't know much about, like RTL chip design. That's not something I really have.
GGS2, Verilog,
Yeah,
cells,
I mean, I know
libraries.
like I know what it is, sort of in the abstract, but the actual details of how it all functions and the
Hmm.
black magic needed, I have no idea, honestly.
Would you say you know more about chip design or more about machine learning?
Probably ML, but that's I would argue I'm stretching that. Um, I don't
It's
really.
I would argue this session is for people who are in chip design who might not know much about machine learning.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Um, it's that third bold line, AI-driven optimization. That's being given by Synopsys.
Hmm.
Full disclosure, Synopsys is a client of mine. We recently did a video on PCIe 7 for their LinkedIn. I think I'll be publishing it live on the channel maybe later this week. But yeah, they're one of the companies that say, hey, these are the 18 different abstraction layers in chip design. We've added machine learning in this one, this one, this one, this one, this
Hmm.
one.
Yeah,
Right. The tools are getting there, and the tools are getting better. You can argue what the correct metric is, but it, place and route is difficult. This is even more than that.
yeah. And then sort of moving on from there, uh, the traditional coffee break, and then after that, LLMs and chip design. So this is using this is being given by Primus AI, who I have not heard of, but I just based off the sort of title of talk. Do you think that this may be like sort of type in what you want a chip to do, and the LLM will go and access these tools from Synopsys and try and make a chip? Or do you think it's something different?
I think it's that plus something different, plus something else, plus something else, right?
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
it's so there is the simple thing of write a test to test XYZ, and it will provide the test, and then you might turn around to
Mhm.
the LM and say, extrapolate this to more use cases. Synopsys, for example, has demonstrated that. I'm pretty sure Cadence has, and Siemens has as well. So it's the rather than spend 6 hours, 6 days making tests, can
Mhm.
you do it in an hour with an LLM? Does
Mhm.
the LLM have the ability to go in, make sure you get the right signals and the right whatevers to do those tests? There could also be the what exactly am I looking at type of LLM, right? So you get a library, you get a particular set of cells, and it's not obvious what they
Mhm.
do, and you ask the LLM, what does this do, or how would I
Mhm.
change this? There's also one feature of LLMs that I don't think people speak about that much, and it comes down to a bit of research I read that was along the lines of we use an LLM to detect when the plasma stream in our manufacturing tool has a disturbance.
Hmm.
So what they
Interesting.
were doing, it was they were either taking I think it was the audio, but they might have been taking the video of the plasma stream, converting that into a text-based representation, putting it into an LLM that was trained to detect variation, and then the LLM would tell you if there's an issue.
Huh. Interesting.
You never think about
Interesting that
LLMs that way.
interesting that they were feeding it into as a text and not just using a visual model to do it.
I believe they were able to fine tune. The thing
Ah.
is, obviously, the text you're putting in is just it's
Yeah.
garbage as
Yeah.
text, but it's binary. It's a form of binary, right?
Mhm.
Though I do wonder how many tokens per second the throughput was. Based on now what I know, and that paper was a couple of years ago, I think, or maybe a year ago. But yeah, there are things like that, right? Um, as long as it's not LLM, as long as they're not just saying LLM just to mean foundation model.
Hmm.
I think the important letter in the acronym is the second L, language,
Mm.
right? What language? You could say, a bit stream is a language, right? Because that's how you build chips, with bit streams and stuff on
Yeah.
on FPGAs. I think it's important here that this whole section is called "Will AI elevate or replace hardware engineers?" Um,
I
do you have an
very much
opinion on
doubt the
this?
latter. I very much doubt the latter because I think you are going to need that human input. You are going to need the human to say, no, this is not right. But I do think that it can enhance the human, so to speak.
It's the interesting thing is that if you'd asked people a decade ago, I want to make a 700 square millimeter chip on Global Foundries. How many people do I need? What do you think the answer would be? 1,000?
For a chip like that, depending on what the chip is doing,
Mm,
probably anywhere from 250 to 500.
yeah. Imagine now doing it with 15.
Yeah.
This is what it's
But
meant to do. So
I wouldn't consider that replacement. I would consider that sort of transfer of resources.
yeah,
Then
it's those other people are now doing other important things,
yes.
which helps amplify. So this is the elevate.
And
It's not replacing hardware engineers. It's elevating them. It's reskilling them almost.
yeah,
Um,
I, I, I actually see a lot of parallels to the debates held about 15 to 20 years ago with automation in like manufacturing industries about how
mm.
that was
They took our jobs.
yeah, basically. But really what ended up happening was people were just retrained.
Hmm.
So it's I see a lot of parallels there. Um
The pushback is that if you're 55, do you want to retrain? Probably not.
no. No.
You're
Yeah,
tired.
yeah.
It's yeah. But if you're 55, can you save to PDF? It's
I would
I'm
hope so in this industry.
there are certain tech people in this industry who are titans who still don't understand how to access the email. Um, so
I should laugh
it
at that, but
um,
yeah,
they're
future
planning a.
directions and panel discussion.
I highlight this because HotChips doesn't usually do a panel discussion.
Hmm.
So I think this is, and it's not going to be a panel discussion from the audience Q&A section, I don't think. So it's going to be a little bit weird, but
Hmm.
we'll see. We'll see. Section 2, which is actually quite. I know, I know who I forgot to email while I'm in town. I need to go see these people. But this is a company you know about, or at least the chair.
Yes. Hmm.
Please explain.
Uh, so yeah, this is four.
Well, so start with the title of the tutorial and let's go
Yeah,
through.
so the title of the tutorial is "The Cooling of Hot Chips," pun intended. How thermal technology is keeping up with the AI revolution. And the chair is from Four Systems. Now, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce your name. I do apologize, but sh- sh- sh-
Session.
yeah, Shishu. I do
No, it's
apologize sincerely.
like session, but sesu.
Sesu.
Um,
That's really hard for
it's
me. I do apologize.
it's am I right? Is I think Seshu's the CEO. Um, Yeah.
I so suck at names. I am very sorry.
Yeah, he's the founder and CEO. It's a guy who I've spoken with a number of times at conferences. Um, I have a video on Fraud. Linus has a massive video on Fraud. PC World has done a few videos on Fraud. It's this MEMS-based cooling solution that has kind of captured the imagination, and people have gone, "Holy crap, that's actually really innovative." There are arguments about the power efficiency, which
Hmm.
right now are that's causing a couple of people to turn away, but most people are still really interested in it. But I think the important thing here is that HotChips in AI, especially, and we've got NVIDIA in this, and everything is all about the AI revolution. You've got hardware reaching 600, 800, 1,000 watts per chip, going up to 1,200 in a new Grace Blackwell. I've seen research from TSMC, and I think I've even published about it on this channel, about how to cool 2,600 watt chips.
Mm.
So cooling important, yo.
Very.
How do you call a 120 kilowatt rack anyway? Very carefully.
Excuse lots of water and or air, though air I think is pushing it quite
Yeah,
literally.
I mean, I think that's the format for this tutorial, right? There's more than just air that can cool things, and what are the new elements in the industry that can cool things?
And I
You've got
think that, well, I was going to say I think the first talk, right, thermal techniques for higher data center compute densities by Tom Garvin's from Supermicro. Supermicro is one of the leading providers of water cooled servers,
mm,
so I think that is going to be very interesting from the how do we scale up, not just how do we build it, but how do we scale up for these massive data centers water cooling, because that's a big question.
how do we build a cost
Hmm.
effective solution at scale for customers?
Yep.
I think that because it's one thing to hear about the hardware companies, it's one thing to hear about the cooling companies. It's another for the to hear from the OEMs that put them together and then sell 100,000 of them,
Hmm.
right? That's not an easy thing to do. Um, and given where Supermicro has been in the news and their financials lately, I'm glad that they're getting some time on stage, because that's not normally a company you'd see at an event like this.
No, no.
Um, And then NVIDIA is going to talk about their NVL72, probably, the big 120
Hmm.
kilowatt rack. Uh, to be honest, I think the main issue there is power delivery, not cooling. Let's get
Yeah,
A sorted
yeah.
before B, but yeah.
And it's not just power delivery within a rack; it's power delivery throughout the data center, which is
Mm,
something that we rarely consider, but it's very big. Um, and then sort of moving to the second part of the tutorial. Not just these big servers, but edge devices, thermal challenges of edge devices, which Qualcomm is
hmm
going to be covering, which I think could be interesting. Though edge devices have sort of the opposite issue in that they are space constrained, right? They're laptops, they're mini PCs, they're not big old racks where you have plenty of space. This is a very different environment. So,
Or they've got a long installation life, and so they don't need
yeah,
moving parts.
yeah.
So the question is, how much power efficiency can you put at the edge? Because
Or,
you're limited
well,
by power, limited by cooling.
I would say, and this sort of goes to what Four is building.
Mm.
If you have moving parts that won't get jammed up by dust or like,
Environmentally resistant.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then the final section is thermoelectric cooling. Are we going to get a session on tech, TEC?
Maybe, I don't know. I've never heard of.
No. Tech. Oh, it's. I think I know who Jesse Edwards is. I think we've connected on LinkedIn. Oh no. Whenever somebody mentions, so okay, so for those who don't know, part of my background is in extreme overclocking. Okay, first rant of the day. Part of my background is in extreme overclocking. So we're talking about tuning computers by increasing voltage and frequency. Doing that increases, the heat output. So you need to cool it somehow. Air, liquid, standard. Then you get into the sub-zero. You could use a solid coolant like dry ice, solid carbon dioxide. You can use liquid nitrogen. You can use liquid helium. Typically, sub-zero isn't for long term. There are some people who've tried to make it work long term, but it's mainly just running for overclocking and records and what have you. There are things called single stage and multi-stage coolers. They rely on the same technology that's in your fridge and your freezer, just it's more of a constant rate. So you might have a multi-stage cooling device with a cold plate that does like negative 160 degrees. Those aren't necessarily configurable. So you can't then suddenly go, oh, I only want negative 155, I only want negative 150. It's that or nothing. At least if you have something like liquid nitrogen, you do what's called dosing, and you manage the heat input versus output. It's a bit more difficult to do on a multi-stage cooler. Am I still here? Because my system's going nuts. Continue rant. Okay, so what is a potential solution? Well, thermoelectric cooling. Thermoelectric cooling adds energy to the system to create a plate where on one side you're cold, on the other side you're hot. It's basically creating a thermal differential of two surfaces. And the idea is you put the cold side, or whatever side I said the cold was, you put the cold side next to your ASIC so it cools it down. And yes, you can vary it with voltage. I do say that in the comments. The thing is, you've now got a hot plate that you still need to cool. So you still need liquid cooling. And guess what? If you've got a chip that cools at 300 watts, you need 300 watts of cooling, or 300 watts of tech to do it.
Yeah. Plus
which means
whatever
your
the
total
efficiency loss
cooling,
is.
your total power consumption for cooling is 600 watts.
Or
What?
I mean, are techs even 50% efficient? Because I've heard numbers like 20% before.
Yeah, there's Brian in the chat saying 5, and he's joking, but it's from a place of knowledge.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Typically thermoelectric cooling may have some relevance in areas where cooling is cheap, but you need sub-zero for something. There is an element of research in semis talking about cryo CMOS. I'm not sure if you've come across this, George.
I haven't.
So if you run your circuitry at negative 70 degrees, you get additional benefits in things like density and power consumption. But the thing is, if you build that chip, you can't run it at room temperature pressure because it breaks. So it has to be in a cryo environment. That's not this. But I'm wondering if there are some,
parallels here.
Or interpolation between room temperature and cryo CMOS. But they're a company that clearly has customers, that clearly has research, that clearly has VC funding. So I would say let's go see what they're talking about, but I know for a fact that during this time I'm interviewing somebody, so I'm going to have to rely on you to tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I'm very hesitant on what's going to be said. That's what I'll say.
We are going to get that talk from Frohr, which I think is going to be one of their first talks at an IEEE event about their solution. So hopefully they tell us how it works.
Yeah, that would be neat because I know a few of the specifics, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have ideas, memes related, obviously. The only issue I have is the fact that their design is meant to be um, unidirectional. It does reverse, but they don't tell you what the vibration mode is for the reverse.
yeah.
You know what I
That's
mean?
yeah. So if you can't attend that talk from four, then write me a couple questions and I can see if I can ask them.
I should email them and see if they're free on Friday for a chat. So,
Okay. Well,
um,
that covers the first day or day zero.
day zero,
So
yes.
yeah. So
And then,
moving on to day one,
so
we
this is actually when
have
it starts. This is actually when it
yes.
starts. So this is where we actually get the proper introduction. I think the introduction on the tutorial is just the introduction to the tutorial session.
Mm,
This is the one where we actually get, yeah, we've had 1,200 people, 1,800 people sign up. We had 1,060 papers and we only accepted 12, that sort of thing. We've got more attendees in person from this country than we ever have before, that sort of thing.
hmm
And many thanks to Stanford for hosting, because this year it's in Stanford. Um, it's
They
I know
misspelled
a number
program.
program.
They forgot the
Um,
R.
I know there are some questions coming in the chat. Once we get through this stage, I
hmm
think we'll go and answer a few before we hit the Zen 5 review stuff.
Yep.
But this is where the good stuff starts. And the good stuff starts with the good stuff.
Yeah. So to start with, Qualcomm's going to be talking about Orion and Snapdragon X Elite, which is it's nice to see Qualcomm talking more and more about this. Ian and I have talked about this before. When
Mhm.
they started talking about X Elite, the GPU and the CPU, that was a very nice change because Qualcomm has historically been very, very conservative about what they share. Um, but I really do like that they've been sort of opening up a bit more. I think that that's very nice and that's very, very welcome. And this is being given by Gerard Williams, who was the founder and CEO of Nuvia, which is the core, or at least that's the team that built the Orin core for Qualcomm. Um, whether it's really the original Nuvia core, probably not. Many things have probably changed in the 4 to 5
For, for,
years. So
for legal reasons, George has to make that distinction.
yeah. But
Um,
yeah, so awesome to see.
it's
Uh,
have you got scheduled time with Gerard?
um,
Or
there's
are you
a
trying to get
thing going
some?
on. There's a
Yeah,
thing going on. Yeah.
it's I think Qualcomm will have to keep him out there for an extra couple of days to deal with all the requests on his time,
Mm,
because I also want to get an interview with him, a refresh from the Tech Summit one we did last year to ask how it's going, ask how it's gone, ask his opinion, ask whether he
uh-huh.
agrees with what people are doing or not, ask what he's seeing inside outside. Um, don't ask him what Gen 2 looks like, he won't tell you.
No, I
Um,
wouldn't suspect he would.
no.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
and then after
Yeah.
Snapdragon is Lunar Lake. So just like Snapdragon X Elite, there was large disclosures around Computex on how it
hmm
works. Lunar Lake, same thing.
Same thing.
Um, I think
Eric
Intel's. Sorry,
Eric
go
is
on.
one that I know. I don't I have like said hi to him. But
Hmm.
other than that, I have tried to book some time with him to get an
Hmm.
interview about Lunar Lake, um, about some of
Wasn't
the
he the
design
P?
decisions.
Was he the P core architect?
Um, I believe he's SOC.
SOC. Okay, yeah. It's Arik was one of the engineers that Intel had at their Lunar Lake Tech Day,
hmm
um, and where they went into a lot of detail. George met a lot of new friends at that event.
Yeah.
He liked it.
Yeah, it was very fun.
It's
But
but we'll see how competitive it is when it comes out later this year.
yep.
But
And then
I'm not sure how much we're going to see new about Orion and Luna than we don't know
I don't
already.
expect much new about Orion other than maybe confirming some of the like structure sizes that we tried to dig out
Hmm.
in our article
Yeah,
about it. But other than that, I don't expect too much. Maybe they'll talk a bit more about their fabric. That would be neat. Um, but yeah, otherwise I don't see much there. Lunar Lake,
yeah.
it depends on what they want to share. They
Mm.
are launching Lunar Lake in I think like just over a week after this, because they're
Um,
launching on the third,
that I'm not sure whether it's a launch rather than
the
an
third or
announcement.
fourth. I think
That
they're announcing SKUs. I think they've said that.
I can't remember. I know the devices won't be on shelves until sort of Q4. They've said
Mm, I
they said it's a holiday season product. So
mm, okay.
yeah,
Well, after Lunar Lake, we go from mobile chips to big, big database systems with IBM Telum 2 processor and the Spire uh, accelerator chip.
it's
SPYRE, not Spire as in Slay the Spire, but yeah.
and not Spyro,
Yeah,
which is what I
no, not
thought when I
Spyro
first.
either.
Um, it's so a couple of years ago, IBM presented Telum, which was the chip that ended up in Z16. So this is Telum 2, which we assume is the product
Mhm.
that's going to end up in Z17.
Yeah.
Not a
And
lot we can say.
well, Will made a good point, or not a good point, but made a point. I really hope that they field questions this time because last year I was very ticked off when
Mm,
they didn't say anything about North. The way that they did it was like, we're not taking media questions, and then did it just that really infuriated me. I hope this year is different. Um,
mm.
Chris Berry is
So
giving it. I don't know Chris Berry. I do know
Chri-
other folks from the
Chri-
IBM.
Chris Berry works under Christian Jacoby,
Yeah.
who did the
Uh,
Telum One processor a couple of years
yes.
ago. Um,
So
so
hopefully he'll be more open about giving details.
so the Telum One presentation for Z16 was actually really good. It was really
Hmm.
open. Um, the the North Pole one from last year was different team, different people, different mindset. I think it's because it's IBM product versus IBM research,
Mm.
right?
And
And so
IBM
this is
research is always more cagey.
they're not as media trained.
Ah, okay.
It's I actually have an interview already scheduled with Christian Jacoby about Telum 2 and how it and Z.
Uh,
Um,
I that yeah, same here.
yeah, so it's one that I think is going to be good because Christian is a very passionate individual um,
Indeed.
and very smart. He actually just I think was it in the last 18 months achieved fellow at IBM, one of their senior
Wow.
fellows,
That's
and
that's
they
a
only give six for a site company the size of IBM. They only give six of
oh,
those a year. So
yeah, to get a fellow at IBM or any of the big companies, Intel, Nvidia, AMD, that's a big sort of you've made a massive impact in this industry.
which is funny because I just did a video with two senior fellows who are giving the next presentation. So we're
Yes.
moving. So we're moving into the second session of the first day of day one, which is technically the second day. Yeah, okay, whatever. This is the Tens talk. So this is from the Jim Keller Company. We've got Yasmina and Devor, who are both senior fellows at the place where I'm filming from. I told you there'd be at least one more plug. Um, and what's fun about this is one, it's about their next generation product, Black Hole. Two, it's going to be about their direct metal interface, Metallium. Uh, the primary thing they're going to speak about here is not necessarily the hardware, but the programming model and how you build what they're building at Tens Torrent together. Um, Interesting fun fact: they are a power couple. They, this
Oh,
is
okay.
this is husband and wife. I actually filmed a video with them yesterday. That's part of the reason why I'm here with yeah, right now. I actually needed to do some pickups because I forgot to do an outro to the video yesterday. But yeah, I've had Yasmina on the channel. She did her PhD in FPGA design, and I cannot think of a more difficult PhD. Forget your rocket science, forget your brain
Yeah.
surgery,
Uh,
FPGA.
oh, FPGs
Uh,
make my head hurt.
yeah, so yeah, and Devore's got an extensive background as well. He's great. We got him on camera for the first time as well. Uh,
Didn't she work at Altera later, Intel,
yes.
and he work at Xilinx?
No, I think he worked at Intel as well for a bit. He
Okay.
may have gone
Okay.
Xilinx Intel.
Okay. I thought that he worked at Xilinx and she worked at Altera, which would have been really funny.
It's yeah, so I've got them both on a video that I'm not sure exactly when that's going to come out. We'll see how processing goes. But their talk here, it's going to be about how, especially because the whole tens torrents ethos going forward is, they're dealing with IP focused on chiplets, right? So you need the chiplets to talk to each other. How does it matter if you have like a coherent memory? How is that memory distributed? How do you manage it? And then also, how do you build software at that low layer to get the most optimal performance out of it? Um, so
Now, yeah,
gonna be
sort of
fun.
moving on to the SK Hynix talk.
Mm.
Am I wonder if this is sort of a continuation of their last year tutorial,
So I
talking
should
more
say
about
some people listen to this will not see it, so you have to explain what you're seeing. You have to say what you
um
see.
so SK Hynix is talking about AI specific computing memory solution from AIM device to heterogeneous AIMX XPU systems for comprehensive LLM inference. That's a that's a title, SK Hynix.
That's somebody who has English as a foreign language creating a
Yeah,
title.
yeah. But that's a very
So
but
just to explain the acronyms here, AIM is acceleration in memory.
okay. So
So
this is
this
like
is
compute in memory.
yeah.
Yeah. So sort of a continuation of last year's tutorial that they gave about compute in memory. Or
Hmm.
maybe this is well, they're also saying heterogeneous AIMX XPU system, which is very confusing as a sentence. But I'm wondering if what that means is they've built a system that is compute in memory only.
No, I think there's one too many X's here. The first one shouldn't
Okay.
be there. I think it should
Okay.
be AIM XPU, which basically means we have a ASIC and connected to it is our AIM, which is what
Okay.
Samsung
So,
presented
so, so
2 or
like what
3 years
Samsung
ago.
did. Yeah.
Yeah,
With yeah, okay. Well, I, yeah, I kind of hope that it's what I said it was, but yeah, what you're saying makes a lot more sense. Um,
yeah. But obviously when Samsung doing it, it was more of a we can do the technology. I think what's SK Hynix here, because I think this is like their third or fourth generation anyway, is
mm,
we're actually putting it to use. Um,
okay,
f-
that would be
so
fun. If yeah,
you've been able to buy, I think, Xilinx FPGAs with these AIM for a couple of years now, but it's like only one specific FPGA model, and you have to
mm,
have a minimum order quantity of something. Some probably stupid high number, which probably means you need at least 100K in hardware.
oh, absolutely,
Um, but one of the things that's interesting people is big part of AI is how much energy you consume moving data. So why don't you do some of the compute while moving data or
yeah,
where the data is stored? So that's why
I know
computing
that.
memory, acceleration in memory is a thing.
Well,
Like
I know that some of the
reductions and or reduces and that sort of thing.
mm, I know that at least for Samsung, it also, at least for the earlier generations, it also reduced the amount of memory that you had by half,
Hmm.
which a lot
No.
of people were like
Well,
it.
so technically, yes, but in reality, no. The only reason it cut your memory in half is because they took the what would be a chip and half the cells were removed, and then of that
Mhm.
space they filled up 5% of it with compute because it
Mm,
was a tech demo.
okay.
Can we do it? Not is this a product?
Okay. 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 No, that's fair. I didn't know that. I thought that they removed half the cells and then substituted that 50% with compute.
No.
Um,
Yeah, it was instead of having like an 8 gig memory module, sorry, memory
mhm,
chip, you'd have a 4 gig with compute in memory.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that was more just a tech demo, not a product.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Um, well,
so
I see another rant coming. So the next one is built for the edge, the next generation Intel Xeon 6 SoC. So this is given by Praveen from Intel. And I have one big, massive question for them. And that
mhm.
is AVX 512 and or AVX 10.1 dash slash 512 supported on Granite Rapids D, or the Edge version of Granite Rapids, because there were in it was a fairly old simulator that Intel puts out that showed that basically said that GNRD does not have AVX 512 or AVX 10.1-512 capabilities. I really hope that that's not the case, because if it
Mm.
is, then that's Intel dropping support for an ISA that they've had on a product line for over 6 years at this point, and they're just dropping support. I really hope that that's not the case, because if it is, then Intel and I need to have a serious talk,
And
because
it's Granite Rapids. I got to assume it does,
you
even
would
if it's D. You would
you
think
would
so.
say that, you would think so, but if they don't want to go through the validation work to do it, I hope I really hope it does. I really hope it does, because if it
So,
doesn't, I am going to have a talk.
as somebody who knows the story of why AVX 512 was dropped in consumer, a story I cannot tell for a number of years until some things expire. Um, I'll leave that one on the table. I
I
don't think they'll cut it. They shouldn't do.
That if they should, it should not even be a thought in their mind. But
Mm.
but I
Yeah.
am
But this
afraid
talk
that
is
they
Granite Rapids D, right? And I think D
yes.
is the important one. It doesn't get a lot
Uh,
of attention these days. It used to when it was the
Broadwell
original
D.
Xeon D.
Broadwell D got a lot of traction.
Mm,
And then
mm,
Skylake came out. That's when they introduced Skylake D, and that's where they introduced AVX 512. Um, and it sort of tapered off from Broadwell. Um, Talked
hmm.
about a lot less. Like the Xeon D for Ice Lake, the Ice Lake D stuff was announced and then wasn't really talked about much after. Um,
It almost feels like they're deprioritizing it in their messaging. So the fact that it's turned up here means that something must be going on.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
no.
So
And then
keynote
there's
every
yep.
day of the 2 days of HotChips, the main 2 days, each day has a keynote. It's usually one. 1 year they had two, and the second one went down like a bag of flaming poop because it was a government one. However, this one is OpenAI, um, and
I'm probably not going to be super interested in it, but
well, so with OpenAI, it's essentially how do you get GPT at scale. Because we all know the more systems you have in a supercomputer, the more likely you are to get a failure of a piece of hardware every hour, every 6 hours, right? And so how do you build scalable infrastructure either with predictable failures or with predictable failover such that you can keep your compute running in the event of a failure? So I think it's more about endurance and control in an AI system. Then again, it could be predictable scaling, as in AI scaling. As in, we know our 2 trillion parameters is going to be better than our 1 trillion parameter model. Who knows?
Yeah. And then moving off that, well, not off, but sort of continuing on to that, NVIDIA Blackwell platform. Hopefully, NVIDIA, you give actual details about what you've changed in Blackwell, because so far, you still haven't published your white paper, which I've been waiting for.
I'm going to argue and say no because it says platform, not chip.
Yeah. I kind of in previous HotChips, NVIDIA never really went deep into the architecture. They talked more about what was around it than the actual chip, which is going to be frustrating for me. But
Do you feel
so be
like
it.
as Nvidia has grown financially, that they're starting to talk less and
Yes,
just hiding
absolutely.
things behind white papers?
Not just hiding stuff behind white papers. Not
NDA.
yeah, and it's frustrating. It's very frustrating.
Um,
I
we,
can
we,
rant about this for a while, so
um,
I would.
yeah, and then the final one in this AI processors part 1 session is Samba Nova. If people aren't familiar with Samba Nova, they are one of the major AI hardware startups. And of the major AI hardware startups, there are 4 that I tend to typically quote. Can you name them?
Grok, Sambanova, Cerebrus, GraphCore, uh, Tenstorrent,
Yeah,
and
not GraphCore. GraphCore is not a startup anymore. They are publicly owned.
I was making the joke.
Yeah.
I
So
think there might be one that I'm missing.
no. So the 4 that I typically talk about, yeah, Grok, Sambanova, Cerebrus, Tenstorrent. Sambanova were one of the first AI hardware startups to get $1 billion in VC money. 1.132, I think they still stand at. They have a CGRA-based architecture. It's a chiplet-based architecture. It's a HBM-based CoWoS architecture. So main chips that use CoWoS: Blackwell, Hopper, Ampere, MI300X, MI250X, Gaudi 3. No, sorry, Gaudi 3 uses EMIB. No, it does use CoWoS.
Gaudi 3, Gaudi 2, Gaudi 1.
And
So
Samba Nova.
basically, Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, all of them.
And Samba, technically Biren did, but they're almost like a defunct one now. But yeah, Samba Nova. So their SN40L is their new architecture called Cerulean. The L was added after the fact when they realized it was good for language. It's funny, if you look at a Samba Nova chip, it may not have the L scratched on it because it was made before that. But their whole big thing is being able to support multi-trillion parameter models. Because they have a CGRA architecture, because they have lots of onboard SRAM, they have HBM, 8 HBM3s, I think, on this chip. I've got pictures of me biting it last
it
year.
looks a lot like Blackwell. If you just look at the 2 chips, they look very similar in terms of their actual physical layout, which isn't surprising.
I thought it was more like Gaudi.
Yeah, I mean, they all sort of look the same. If you put them all next to each other, they sort of all kind of
Sam Manova
tier.
announced this chip in supercomputing in November 23.
Hmm.
That's when I saw it the first time. So
Yeah,
it's interesting to hear about chips going down the CoWoS route because of the CoWoS limitations. So
it's not surprising, but yeah. So, and then moving on, Gaudi 3. Hey, uh, speaking of the devil, um,
the devil?
eh,
No,
eh,
you can get 8 chips in a baseboard for $125,000. What are you talking about?
honestly pretty good. But actually, it's also nice to see Habana sort of on the same wavelength as Qualcomm. It's nice to see Habana talking more about
Hmm.
their chips because historically they were also, although Intel as a whole is quite open about talking about their chips, Habana was sort of the, I guess, black sheep of that in that they were very
Hmm.
recluse. It's nice to see them talking more about it. Though, as we all
Yeah,
know, Gaudi 4 has been canceled, and all that IP is going to be merged into Falcon Shores, which is the successor to Ponte Vecchio.
it wasn't
Um,
cancelled. It was merged.
the the dedicated chip itself was canceled, but the IP was
No,
merged.
I'm gonna Falcon Shores in
Uh
its
huh.
all AI configuration
Uh huh.
is Gaudi 4.
Really? Huh. Okay. That brings up
Or
a bunch of questions, but
or
okay.
it is the equivalent of a Gaudi 4. Um,
Okay,
okay, we're
that
going
makes a
up,
lot.
we're going off on a tangent here, but the point of Falcon Shores is that you have tiles of either GPU, of AI, or HBM, right? And in Falcon Shores version 2, you tiles in there. And the whole point is that customers can mix and match which tiles they want. And if a customer wants an all AI configuration using the Gaudi architecture, then that could be construed as a Gaudi 4.
I don't know how I feel about that from a
Sick.
programming perspective. That seems like it's
It's the
not going to be
future.
very fun.
It's the future, George. Chiplets. It's the future.
Well,
The
yeah,
future.
yes,
The
but
future.
but consider but consider that Gaudi 3
One of
doesn't
us.
have the
One of
front.
us. One of us. Sorry. Yes. Gaudi 3 doesn't have the front end required
Well,
for one
Gaudi 2 or
API.
3, neither
Yes.
Gaudi 2 or Gaudi 3 has the front end for hooking into one API. I
That changes.
hope Gaudi 4 does.
Yes, it would.
I it needs
In
to.
yes, it would. Intel is 100% on this.
Okay. Uh, okay.
Okay.
I just have reservations about that, but I guess when it launches, we'll see. Moving on to something that has launched and has gotten a lot of airtime from us and a lot of other folk is AMD's MI300X. I don't expect anything new here. I expect this to be sort of
Talk about the
already
architecture, talk
known
about the
stuff.
platform,
Yeah.
talk about the
Um,
MI325X, the new one they
maybe.
announced.
Although that's just an HBM bump. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
uh yeah. Um
It,
so yeah.
it,
Uh,
AMD does this very well. Their HotChips presentations are mostly
yeah.
cover stuff that we launched in the first 9 months
Yeah.
of the year.
Which is a
So
bit frustrating, but
yeah.
it is what it is. So moving on from that, uh, Broadcom, an AI compute ASIC with optical attach to enable next generation scale up architectures.
So this is
Is this what Patrick Moorhead was showing off in a Twitter post with 12 HBM stacks and it 2 chips, 12 HBM stacks? Do you think it's that, or do you think it's something different?
I don't know what Patrick shows off. It could be his backside for all I care. Yeah, no, it's for me the important thing here is the optical attach, right? It's very
Mhm.
hard to do. It's very important to get it right. There are a number of companies and startups who are trying to do it. Some of them are more ahead than others. Some of them are predicting, 1,000x more than others. So who knows what to believe?
Yeah.
Um, Broadcom, Broadcom's a bit weird. You have to be in their inner circle to even know what's going on. And the only way to get into their inner circle is to already know somebody in their inner circle. They've
Yeah.
never given me the courtesy of being reached out to talk
Mm.
about their stuff. Um, it's it's interesting how companies like Marvell's a bit better. Marvell actually does do outreach, and they do have an open analyst day that I've been to a couple of
Mhm.
times now. And I do chat with them, and they do talk about what's coming down the pipe, and they do press releases, and I'd speak to them. Broadcom, nothing. And even when at an event, I knew that people I knew at Broadcom were there because I saw them posting about it, and I reached out to the people I knew at Broadcom. The PR team was like, "Hey, can you get a chance to say hi, have a meet up?" And like, "Oh no, they've already left." And yet 6 hours later, they were still posting on LinkedIn that they were still there.
Mhm.
It was weird. If anybody from Broadcom is listening, give us a shout. Would love to hear more. If not, I'll catch you at HotChips. Don't run away before I can catch you. Um,
He
that
wants to
being
munch on
said,
your chips.
it's yeah
Yeah.
no, it's
So.
it's important to understand because Broadcom also does a number of services as a third party,
Mhm.
as a co-developer of a bunch of ASICs. So uh,
Yeah. And then sort of the last one for the day one, second
yeah,
day, is Furiosa AI, which you would know more about, but they're a South Korean startup. Didn't no. I'm thinking Rebellions and
Sapion.
um, Sapion merged, not Furiosa.
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
no. This is another SK Telecom funded South Korean startup.
Wait, are
Their
they
first.
SK Telecom? I thought that they were LG, not SK.
Oh, you may be right.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's the
it
Sapion that's SK.
Yeah. So Furiosa's first product was called Warboy. They have announced Renegade, and this is the Renegade presentation. So I don't even think it's fully taped out yet and qualified.
Mm.
Because I've got pictures of me going with Warboy. Um,
Hmm.
it's They have reached out and offered a pre-briefing, but I think I'm busy. So I said, hey, I'm in town. Can I come to their office here and meet up? And they just said, see you at HotChips, which is annoying. And I think the PR person who just sent me that is somebody you know as well. But June Pike is the CEO of Furiosa. And if you think of the sort of person who would come up with names like Warboy and Renegade and Mad Max, his profile picture on LinkedIn is exactly the sort of person you'd think of who would think of those names. He looks like a really cool dude. I'd like to meet him and see what he's thinking about. But yeah, not much insight into Furiosa. I'm sure I could pull up a graph of how much money they've raised. But
Yeah.
that's the thing. These small
Well,
startups are testing stuff to see if the
yeah.
market wants it. And to be honest,
And
Renegade RNGD makes me feel like it's a random number generator, and it's definitely not.
yeah. Well,
It,
moving to conference day.
so I will say Furiosa AI. Sally and I did predict on the AI hardware show. We were wondering how they got away with trademark infringement. It depends how much of that is trademarked.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, Furiosa is going to be kind of hard to.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
some people have, yeah.
Yeah.
So some people have trademarked Moore's law is dead, don't you know? Um, co-
How they got away with that, I have no idea. But yeah. Anyway.
um, Conference day 2. We now have AI processors part 3, and I have a feeling this is not the last part because this is how
No.
big AI is. The chair of this session is actually Yasuo Ishii, who has walked behind me several times during this stream, I should add. So he is one of the engineers here at Tense Torrent, one of the senior engineers.
Yeah.
But we're now going into I guess a bit more non-standard stuff that does AI.
Yeah. So speaking of FPGAs, this is a presentation on AMD's Versal AI Edge Series Gen 2 for vision and automotive. This is their
Do you think they hired Intel's core naming team? Sorry, you
I
knew I was
know,
going there.
yeah, I knew exactly where AMD, you and me, your naming teams. Please stop with this naming schemes. This whole AI everything, please. I know it's a big thing, but
No,
I
this is fine. It's just the fact that they've got to add Versal plus AI plus the Edge plus the series
yeah,
plus the Gen. To be honest, series and Gen are redundant.
yeah. Have one of them, Series 2 or
Um,
Gen 2.
or just call it 2.
But I
Edge
know
2
why it's Edge series because they have different. They have the Edge series and then the premium series and then they have
Prime.
multiple. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is a talk from the Xilinx team on their Edge
Yeah.
AI solution. When they announced what Versal was, this sort of adaptive compute acceleration platform, it made sense. But the question I always had is, how do you build on this? Because it was basically a heterogeneous thing of everything. You had some FPGA, some DSP, some AI, some CPU cores, some memory controller, some
Mhm,
other IOs, and a NOC, a network on chip.
mhm.
Surely the only evolution is what ratio to put those in.
Well, yes, but there's also what's interesting with these chips is not just the AI stuff because they had that before. They've now added a GPU to some of them, so it literally is a do everything chip.
Oh, it has Mali, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, which is
ARM
quite
Mali.
interesting. That's
AMD
for
sells ARM
US
Mali. Ooh.
AMD to abandon Radeon? Question mark? Question mark?
Oh, you've been reading Tom's Hardware recently.
But yeah,
Sorry, inside joke. Inside joke.
yeah.
It's so
Anyway,
the next chip after that. I mean, sorry, Versal Edge Series using Series Gen 2 Vision and Automotive. It's very much going to be in their marketing materials for that. The next chip is an academic chip. One of the features of HotChips is that they usually feature a couple of academic papers in
mhm.
this. This is from Stanford, so on site, called Onyx, an accelerator for sparse tensor algebra. For people who aren't familiar, can you explain what we mean by sparsity in AI?
I I honestly don't quite know.
Okay,
Um,
I,
like
I, I
that.
thought you'd.
I,
So okay,
I know
sparsity.
I know what tensor algebra is, but I, I don't know if they mean something different because sometimes what tensor means can change, and it's
No, so in this case, sparsity is instead of having dense algebra,
mhm,
can you make it into a larger sparse matrix full of zeros
yeah.
that is
That
ultimately
I know.
faster? Yeah,
That I know.
but the,
I know
but
what sparse is, but I don't quite. I don't quite know what they mean by tensor algebra in terms of what exactly are they saying there because you could say multiple things.
isn't it 3 or 4 operand operations?
Well, so here's the thing. Whenever you say tensor, well, what do you mean a 1D tensor, a 2D tensor, a 3D tensor, a 4D? Like, what do you mean by a tensor? Because there's multiple. There's there's
Yes.
multiple dimensions of tensor, right? So, what exactly
So
do you mean by tensor?
the problem with sparsity in AI is, well, no, the good thing about sparsity is if you have a 0 times 0 plus 0,
Mm-hmm.
your answer is 0.
Yes.
Do you actually push the bits through the operations to do it, or do you detect it and just put a 0 at the end? That's the issue in hardware, one of the issues in hardware right now. And also, what level of sparsity actually makes sense for the accuracy of the AI models? Implementing sparsity isn't a simple thing. Okay, it is
No.
simple, but it takes die area as well. You have to pay the penalty for doing it. This is why the big AI chips are apparently Level 1 Text is doing a live stream as well. Hey, Wendell. Yeah, having it natively in silicon is beneficial if your programming model is one that pivots hard to sparsity, or you just have a compute bound chip anyway. So
No.
yeah,
Um.
this is one of the problems with academic talks at HotChips is we don't know what they're talking about because we have no in advanced knowledge. With most of these things, we kind of know what's coming down the pipe, or at least we know the company can speak about what they're doing.
Mhm.
Um, so
But yeah,
yeah, and then
Mr.
and then
Vimpus, I I I know that tensor is a generalization over scalar, vector, and matrix, but I be more specific when you say tensor. That bugs me. Going
yeah.
back to
So
industry.
this next session I'm interested in, it's Meta or Facebook's inference accelerator, the MTIA, which is RISC-V.
Oh, interesting. Oh yeah, it is. You're right. You're right. I completely forgot about that.
They licensed Andy's Technologies RISC-V cores for it.
Okay. Which
Uh,
actually kind of makes us similar, ironically enough, I think, to TensorTorrent stuff.
no,
What I what I meant is that they're both using RISC-V as a base for a building of a AI chip. Let me
the
be
AI
slightly more.
part, the AI part of TensorTorrent doesn't use RISC-V; it uses RISC. It's been
Huh.
reported wrongly a couple of times.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Well.
because because there are a lot of people who assume that RISC and RISC-V is the same thing.
Oh. Okay. Okay. That's yeah. No. No. Okay. Then my mistake. I didn't realize that was in fact wrong. My bad.
It also doesn't help that a 10.6 core has 5 RISC cores.
Yeah. Uh.
Yeah, you see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've not actually looked in detail at the Andes RISC-V core. Meta, there are a couple of papers on it. I know because Sally has sent me them. I've not looked at them too carefully. That's my problem, finding the time to do that.
Mm.
So actually, just spending the time and sitting down in front of this should be interesting. We have been going for an hour, and we've only just passed, day one. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna
We should probably
let's speed
try
it
to
up.
speed up a bit.
Yeah.
So
So next
Dojo,
session,
Tesla. Where's
still
Dojo,
exists.
Tesla? I You
Um,
keep saying that, but I don't see it. Anyway.
no, but it exists because we're seeing it here, or at least
But
we're talking about the network.
yeah, that's the network, which is
Right.
anyway.
So the title of the talk is Dojo, an exascale lossy AI network using the Tesla Transport Protocol over Ethernet, or TTPoE. This is tech potato over Ethernet.
I was thinking 10
Eric
port power over Ethernet.
Eric Quinnell from Tesla. He's actually one of the people that I think got me into Tesla's AI Day a couple of years ago. We haven't been able to schedule a pre-brief for it, so I think I'm still just going to see it at the event. But yeah, no, because this session is networking processors. Tesla created their own networking silicon for Dojo. So this is going to be a dive into what they're doing here. And I think for us, because we don't spend much time talking about, say, the DPU or the SmartNIC or the networking processors, I think this will actually be quite interesting. Just to get a lift under the lid to how they work, because we just don't spend time in the space. The next one is Fabrica, which is a company I've met with at Supercomputing last year. I'm not sure if you were there when the PR team, I kept running past them and they were saying, come to our Fabrica booth, come to our Fabrica booth. I
No,
did.
I don't think I was.
I can't remember what they were doing. But yeah, it's optimized networking controllers, so Super NICs. One of the things I've spoken about today with a variety of people, funnily enough, is what happens if you take a standard protocol and strip away the stuff you don't need. Do you gain performance? So if you take the Ethernet spec and you take out the bits of the spec you don't need, can you spend that extra time, those extra bits, or can you develop a new parity methodology? So
yeah, I think that's partly what Ultra Ethernet is trying to do. Is
yeah.
strip out parts.
Well, Spectrum X already does that. So yeah. The last talk in this session is from Intel.
Did you see that NVIDIA joined? Slight tangent here.
No.
NVIDIA joined Ultra. Yep, they joined the Ultra Ethernet consortium.
That's because they have to support it through Bluefield.
Yeah.
Also, they have to.
If you've been noticing, they've been talking a lot less about InfiniBand as of late, and they've been talking a lot more about Ethernet.
Investors are still interested in both because because InfiniBand is accretive margins, right?
Yep. But
so it also ties you in.
I just found that interesting. Anyway, we do have to move forward, but the next talk is 4 terabit optical compute interconnect chiplet for XPU to XPU connectivity by Intel. We've seen this before. They showed this off last year.
No, they didn't.
Wait, did they? I thought that they did.
Wasn't them.
Oh. But they partnered with IR
Labs.
Yeah, IR Labs. AYRA. I know how to write it, but not to say
it. AYAR.
Yeah, AYAR. Oh no, I flipped the A and the R. Dang it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You're thinking Chrono Trigger. The way to think about it is it's like agar jelly, but instead of a G, it's a Y. So last year, IR Labs showed 4 terabit per second point-to-point connectivity based on a chiplet integrated into an Intel FPGA. And that's why it had the Intel logo on, because it was the Intel FPGA base. But Intel are creating their own technology to do it as well.
Okay, so this is different.
Even though I think Intel are an investor in IR, which makes this all more weird. It's They announced earlier this year that they have the first 4 terabit optical chiplet solution, and I got a ping in my inbox saying, "Wait, what? How are they defining first? Oh, it's the first one on Intel Foundry or something stupid like that." Yeah.
Okay.
It's
So
weird. So I'm pretty sure the first question in that session for the Q&A will be, "Isn't this what IR Labs showed last year?" Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. So keynote number 2.
Victor Peng, who just after this is leaving AMD, or retiring, I should say.
So he had his retirement party at AMD in San Jose yesterday. Mark Papermaster was posting about it on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I've reached out to AMD for an interview with Victor. Because in the same way that I interviewed the Synopsys CEO just before he retired, I want to catch Victor and get him to be his final interview
Yeah.
before retiring. Given that he's in town, I'm in town. Not got any confirmation yet, so we'll see how that goes. But it's going to be an interesting retrospective for somebody who is very well respected and seasoned in this space to end up as the head of an AI group at a large company like AMD. So
Yeah. So moving on. Speaking of one of the AI startup darlings, Cerebrus is talk. Wafer scale, bleh, English, very hard. Wafer scale AI enabling unprecedented AI compute performance. Are they
I think this talk is going to be about their wafer scale engine 3 and how
okay?
they've scaled workloads across a 64 chip system for
That
their
will be
Condor
nice because
Galaxy.
I've been wondering what happened with WSE3 because they haven't really been talking about it too much.
Well, no,
Um,
they announced it, and they said it was
oh, did
going
they?
into Condor Galaxy 3. Yeah,
Oh, I must have missed that. Okay. But yeah, uh, that's almost certainly going to be interesting. And
it's because the major question is, does their hardware actually scale? Because people assume that the 1.2 terabyte per second off wafer connectivity isn't enough to keep it fed,
mm,
right? So
we'll see. So China, China. Um,
China.
so, yeah, I can't do the voice.
Sorry,
Uh,
for people wondering, it's a Trump reference.
yeah, Shang, Zhang, Zhang She.
George, English hard or word hard?
Both are hard.
Yeah, Jiangshan.
Zhang She.
Shit.
An open. So this is an open source RISC-V core, which is supposedly up there in the performance levels as Cortex A76, which is fairly old at this point. But if it is up to that level of performance, that's quite impressive. And I think that's very positive for the Chinese CPU design teams.
Ecosystem.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, the whole question about can RISC-V push high performance is still a question people want answered. Companies like TensTorrent, Ventana Micro, Revos all claim that they can. We're still and they say
the, the,
our simulations show that yes, we can hit high performance. We're still waiting for tape out.
yeah. There's also another one that just announced that it starts with an A, formerly the Thunder X team at Marvell, or who's leading it.
Oh
I can't
yes,
remember
I
their.
heard about them yesterday.
Yeah, I can't remember their name off the top of my head, but so they're also saying it. But yeah, Risk Five.
You're going to get me going through my closed tabs now. So yeah, sorry, keep going. You keep going. I'll see if I can find the name of the
But
company.
yeah, so this next one, this is the last set of talks. This is high performance processors part 3. And the first one is Ampere 1, sustainable computing for AI and cloud native workloads. Now, Ampere 1 just GA'd on Oracle Cloud like a week ago. And I've been testing it. And we
Oh,
have some preliminary data.
nice.
And
I didn't realize you had access
and
yet.
I've been writing an article about it.
Did you have to
And
pay for
I've been
access?
utterly yes. And I've been utterly struggling about writing it because
Are you in contact with the Ampere team?
I need to email them because I've already
There
publicly
are questions.
in my Discord. I've already sort of said it in the Discord publicly, so I'll say it here. we were getting branch prediction accuracy of sub 85%, which is, to put it lightly, very bad.
Okay.
And we were getting single core memory bandwidth of 7 gigabytes per second. Now, that could be an Oracle Cloud thing. I don't know. That could be Oracle Cloud QoSing us to death. But
This is part of the problems of only testing stuff in a multi-tenant cloud environment.
yes,
So
but
it's
we've also seen some very bizarre behavior where writes are faster than reads for whatever reason out to memory. And I don't mean by a little bit, I mean 50 to 2x, like 50% to 2x. I don't know what's
the
going on,
talk
especially with that branch prediction accuracy. I have no idea what's going on. I
the
really
talk the
desperately hope that that's wrong. But
so the talk at HotChips on Ampere 1 is just going to be talking about the architecture and their internal benchmarks. The
yes,
questions George has, you may think are relevant to an environment like this.
no, it's
They're
not.
not.
I absolutely understand that. I understand that. I know that it's not. Absolutely.
It's for something like that, George needs to be able to sit down with an engineer, have a good discussion, walk the engineer through exactly what they're doing,
Uh-huh.
making sure the engineer agrees that it's the right way to do what George wants it to do, because everyone has blind spots, right? There's that it now it can get to a point where George has explained what he's got, and the engineer or the company or whatever however you want to subdivide that can say, we don't think your test is accurate, or we don't think your testing is approximate to what our customers are using it for, or they can have a very good reason for seeing what George is seeing. And then it's up to George to decide whether he agrees or disagrees with a statement on what he's going to post. Look,
Yeah.
this is a thing. This is a thing. And I do wonder if we'll actually get to it today. There are two things here. One is just the performance, and two is the story of how to get that performance, right? That's two different, in my mind, that's two different things. A lot of content creators online consider that the same thing,
Yeah.
right?
Eh,
It's
Let's really quick go to Inside My AI 100. This is
mhm.
Microsoft's AI chip. They are supporting the MX FP format from OCP. Really interested to see how that works. It also is using CoWoS. And
Ooh.
then after that is Zen 5. We'll get to that. So I'm going to skip that for now. And we're going to go straight to the MN Core 2, which is Preferred Networks, which you guys probably haven't really heard of, but they made some very big waves in the energy efficient supercomputing space about 4 to 5 years ago. And this is now their
Mhm.
second version of their
A-
architecture.
MN Core was a 3,000 square millimeter
Oh, it was an utter
package.
beast. It was an
Yeah,
utter beast.
you know what it reminds me of? Uh,
Huh.
Zen 1 Zeppelin with four dies
Yes,
and having
yes.
the
Except
IO on each
it
die
was this
is a
way.
square. Yeah, it was
Instead
like
of
a
it
square.
being like this way, it was a square. But yeah.
Yeah. It's I remember seeing the images of that in Supercomputing 2018, and it was like a very small
Mhm.
poster. It's like picture.
Yeah.
This is, and you can still find that article on Anantech for
Mhm.
MN Core. So MN Core 2, yeah, be
Yeah.
interesting to see what's
Yeah.
going on there and where their market is.
Oh, absolutely. Now, going back to Zen 5.
Hang on. It's are we wrapping up hot chips here?
Yes. Yeah.
Because if so, I think there are a few questions to address in the chat.
Okay.
And I do want to thank Sebastian for the love for the problem with tech media. Thanks. This
Oh, we're going to get into that.
no, this was a video I did, the Linus Steve video. Um,
Yes. Yeah, I
so
know, but there's that talk is going to be relevant again here soon.
uh, it's let's see if I can go through some of the questions that people have had. Um, Not relevant to the content, but with what is this video taken? We're using a streaming service where we both input into a streaming service, and the streaming service distributes it out to multiple platforms.
I actually think that this was talking about the plasma, the AI plasma stuff. Like, how do they take the video?
No clue. Ancient paper, I can't remember. David Sherry says Eric Schmidt, the Google guy, says AI will write all kinds of software, but NVIDIA customers will stay with them because of dependence on CUDA. Why couldn't AI enable creation of competitors' comparable/compatible software hardware? Because designing shit is hard.
Yeah.
And also, AI is not the one that funds it. People have to fund it.
Yeah.
Unless you're a Skynet. Eric has been so far away from silicon and silicon design for ages. I've seen a lot of commentary about the talk he gave, saying this is clearly somebody who, while financially invested, has no clue what goes on at the lower levels of his company anymore. So
yeah. So Davida says AMD is working on ROCm. Yes, they are. And it's like I've said, it's night and day from 12 months ago. But they still have to fund it. And that's coming from people. That's coming from sort of the top of AMD, right? So yeah.
So going back through, Mr. Vipitis asks about the Fora cooling. Isn't there a copycat for that already? There was one on PC World this week. Yes, XMEMS. Davina says XMEMS looks interesting. I got the press release for that like a month ago, and I very highlighted it in my brain saying, this is actually really interesting. I should follow up on this. Did I have any time? No. Did I send them a bunch of questions? I can't remember. I think they didn't give much details because it's a startup with a proprietary solution. Brian says XMEMS is such a stupid name. I'm not too sure.
There's at least it's not AI mems or something like that.
MAIM. No, that's memes. I'm sure there's a way to call it memes or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Brian says 5% tech efficiency. Going back to that. So Cyber says
300-watt thing.
So it says that must be the first time I read an tech article about the tech cooling being such a pain in the butt. Carter asking what laptop platform am I streaming from? I've got a Asus ZenBook Meteor Lake, Intel Evo, one of their premium systems. Funnily enough, I do have my very cool Zen 5 system with another ZenBook with their Serra aluminum one. I just haven't set it up enough yet to work from it as a daily. The idea is that I pivot to that. It is a little bit bigger though. I'm not sure how I'm going to feel with a 15 point something inch on a plane versus this 13.6 or whatever it is.
I like this quite small 13-inch Pro.
Yeah.
PX13.
The benefit is because I fly so much, I typically get to choose my seat when I book. I always get a bulkhead, so I never have to worry about people leaning back on me. I have to deal with having slightly smaller thigh space though, but I think it's a trade-off worth it.
Yeah.
It's Davina says Battle Mage graphics in a lake. It is XE2.
Yes.
It is not the Battle Mage configuration. The configuration is determined on slices and subslices.
Oh, I know what you mean. So it's Battle Mage IP, but Battle Mage the DGPU will be different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do people other than Intel say XPU? Yes, pretty much everyone. Thing is, XPU isn't a product; it's a description of a family of products. Other people may say AI ASIC or just ASIC.
Or
So,
APU. AMD.
No, don't get me started on other companies saying APU for things that aren't. Yeah. So,
I did that on purpose.
Chris Jackson says, yes, Intel is definitely invested in IR. Yeah, thanks for the clarification there. Also, I want to know the effect of scaling cores up and down on Cerebrus wafer scale. They have presented a bunch of data on this. I think wafer scale 3 just brings a little bit something different into the mix with 5 nanometers. So Davina says, I think Arrow Lake is going to blow Lunar and Meteor Lake away. We'll see.
Completely different. Arrow Lake is a very different product from Lunar Lake. They're not really.
And I will correct Davina here. It's not all totally outsourced. The packaging is done on Intel.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I think with that,
let's talk about Zen 5.
Let's go into the rant.
The question is, which way do you want to do this? Do you want to? So when I initially pitched this section of the stream to George, I said, let's talk about the Zen 5 reviews. Because both of us were at Zen 5 Tech Day in some form or another. We've both gone over the architecture disclosures. We both spoke to Mike Clark at the event. We both had videos interviewing him, and we were both surprised when they said 14% uplift IPC, because we said this is such a fundamental change in the architecture. Is that it? And Mike and the team said that because this is such a radical, clean sheet ground up design, dual porting everything in the core, going from 4 wide decode to 2 4 wide decode, and everything else in between, and the AVX 512 having the 512-bit execution path through that. We said why only 14? They turned around to us and said, look, software is going to take some time to adapt to how this architecture is built in order to extract IPC. Because ultimately, this is what this game is on CPU land. How do we extract IPC from code? Not all code can run at 6 IPC, 6 instructions per clock.
I would sort of tack on and say not just IPC, but also ILP, which is
instruction level parallelism.
Yes, as well as memory level parallelism, right? So you have to extract all 3 of those. Now you can sort of say that instruction level parallelism is IPC to some degree, but it really is best if you separate all 3 into their constituent parts.
So I think part of it is you take a stream of instructions. It looks very serial, but then you realize, hang on, this one we need to load this data value. Perhaps we can run another one alongside it because it's not dependent, so completely parallel. Or if there is a dependency chain, can we predict that dependency chain such that when the value comes back, if we predicted correctly, then we've already done all the work.
Or can you break up that dependency chain? Right? That's what out of order buffers do, right?
So it's very dependent on the code going through the chip, how the code is managed, whether it's directly pipelined or micro-coded. And a lot of code today isn't written with the knowledge of what processor it's going to run on.
No.
Right? It's very generic. Your browser, for example, is unlikely to be over-optimized for your specific generation of Zen or Intel Core. Unless it's Orion, then it probably is, just because that's what they've gone and done.
Yeah.
The one-offs tend to do that. But yeah, so there won't be, say, a Zen 3 specific version, a Zen 4 specific version, a Zen 5 specific version. You get that in the smartphone space. Sometimes you get that in Apple land sometimes. It's not so much a big thing unless it's driven from a app store like the Windows Store. That way it knows exactly what you're running, and if there is a compiled target version, then it will install it. The thing is, having a compiled target version is just another version that the software company making the software has to support. And sometimes that's a pain in the ass. The only major software, well, the only software that does that to any good degree that's public about it, I think, is Y-Crunch. And we'll get to speak about Alex in a second. But in the same way that, say, SSE, SSE2, SSE3, AVX, AVX2, AVX512, these instruction sets propagate over time into code. So you take this one path if you have AVX12, you take this path if you don't. In the same way, software has to catch up on the architecture side as well as the instruction side. And the argument, and based on the data I've seen, because the reaction to Zen 5 was, I think in general, we expected more. We expected more baseline performance uplift from a big section of the community, both in standard software and in gaming. What segment of the market didn't say that? Those with hyper-optimized code bases who built and optimized for Zen 5. And it's because I'm not saying it's such a fundamentally different design, you're breaking the instruction set. I'm just saying it requires a different way of thinking that people aren't familiar with.
Yeah. And like Mike said, this sets the stage for future Zen CPUs. And I'm gonna make a prediction here. I don't think that Arrow Lake is going to be particularly good at gaming compared to Raptor Lake. I think there will be about equal. Various reasons behind that, but that's my prediction. But I think it will still be good in servers and in laptops in the form of Lunar Lake, which, like I said, is a different product, but the core is shared, Lion Cove. So it really, what Zen 5, and to a lesser extent, but still is doing, Lion Cove does, is it sets the stage for the next generations. That's what these cores are doing.
It's right. So people talk about Jim Keller, the chip designer, being a magician. And I can admit it's a phrase I've used. Zen 5 is the epitome of what Jim Keller's design philosophy is. Every so often, rip it up and start again. Mike Clark, one of the lead architects, senior fellows at AMD, head of that division, has said what this is. Zen 5 and Zen 6 will arguably be of the same ilk, but Zen 6 they expect, because of the longevity of the core design in the market, will see the longer term benefits of that fundamental change. It's
and
we're still expecting AMD to do. We're going to see changes like this more often.
So here's the thing, right? If you look at Zen 1 through Zen 4, they were very clearly based on the same. They were not the same architecture in no way, but they were very much sort of descended from each other.
The philosophy was similar.
Zen 5 to Zen 8 doing that same sort of following of trajectory, right? I very much see sort of that being the follow-up, right? And continuing the lines of thought.
Moving from planar to FinFET, from FinFET to gate all around.
Yeah.
It takes time to learn to optimize it. I mean, look at first generation FinFETs on Intel versus fourth generation FinFETs. It looks night and day,
Yeah.
but same principally, the same philosophy behind it. I mean, the thing is, there has been a lot of talk here that, oh, they optimized it for server rather than for consumer, or this was their target all along. The thing you have to realize is that these architectures are designed at the very latest 18 months prior, right? The microarchitectures are, of course, I'm talking about top level. There are obviously the fine tuning and signal integrity and frequency differences and that sort of thing. An instruction going through a Zen 5, a set of instructions going through a Zen 4 and a Zen 5 core are going to kind of look like the same if it doesn't hit and if it doesn't have any bottlenecks, right? It's not going to go through any faster. What it does is what a core expects is that most code will be bottlenecked in some way in which parallelism can be extracted or latency can be hidden. And we can't just keep going wider. We can't just keep making decoders bigger. We can't just be making micro caches bigger. We can't just be making the amount of execution ports bigger, because at some point there's a law of diminishing returns. Instead, you have to fundamentally change the way you approach. So things like dual porting, half of your core, the way you do your reservation stations and through to your execution ports and your retire and your read bandwidth, your write bandwidth, how you do branches. This branch predictor from Zen 5 is taking a 30-year-old research paper, as we said in our previous tech routine, and actually implementing it, and it's actually pretty good. Does it do much on normal code? Apparently not. However, will it be a point where, as code gets more complex, it will be able to assist and alleviate some of the bottlenecks?
I would actually argue that point, because if you go to our article, I think it's the version, the latest one, where Zen 5's branch predictor shows its prowess. It beats all the other branch predictors in. Granted, we didn't run too many tests because this is very time intensive, but it beats all the other branch predictors.
So this is chipsandcheese.com. This is what George is the editor-in-chief of.
And this is our article written thanks to Clam Chowder, who will be at HotChips with us.
Oh, he will be.
So
good. I didn't.
Yeah,
I didn't think he was confirmed.
Cool.
Yeah,
no, we got press passes, so, and he was like, cool. So yeah, if you scroll down quite a bit, yeah, more. Here we go. You missed it. Go up.
Oh no, I'm just being facetious now. I just kept scrolling.
Okay. Up. There we go. Branch prediction, right? If you pull up essentially those graphs, right? Now, lib x264 is not very branch intensive. There's not many branches involved here. But you can see where there have been. This looks very small. Trust me, we'll get to more impressive improvements soon.
But you can see that Zen 5 is still at the top.
Yeah, and what you have to realize is that 1% in branch predictors is massive. That's huge, right? It may not seem like a lot from a purely percentage perspective, but going from Bulldozer to Zen 5, that 2% is huge in terms of your instructions per clock that you can get. And it's not just that branch prediction. There's also ISAs involved, of course. But this is a large part of why Zen 5 in this workload gets over 2x Bulldozer at the same clocks, right? It's 2%, but it's massive in terms of branch. I cannot stress this enough. It may look like small percentage differences, but it's huge. Now, if you'll go to
I like big branch predictors and cannot lie. Your others can't deny.
I knew that was going to show up, but you were going to say that. But if you could go back, so this is
Oh,
miss
okay.
per thousands instructions, and this
Okay.
is how many mispredicts you're getting. Now, what's interesting is Zen 2 and Redwood Cove get lower mispredicts per thousand instructions, but the accuracy of Zen 5 is still higher and can still pull more IPC. And when I say IPC,
Mm-hmm.
I do mean instructions per clock. I don't mean performance per clock, which is what most people refer to as IPC, which it's not. Those are two different things. Now, if you go down, here we
To the
go.
7-zip?
7-zip. 7-zip is very branch intensive. And you can see if you go back, if you go to the right, we were at 1.5, 1.6 misses per instruction. We're now at 9,
Mm-hmm.
right? Massive change, much more branch heavy. And if you go back to the branch prediction accuracy, you'll see where Zen 5 does start pulling ahead of its competitors, not just
Yeah.
Zen 4, but also Redwood Cove.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, you got
it's
0.15% here, and you got another, say, 0.3% to these group, and then
yeah.
like almost
And
1%
again,
to Skylake.
this seems small, but these are very important gains.
Where would
Pentium
Pentium
4's
4 be on the...
Pentium 4's branch predictor was actually not bad. What Pentium 4 struggled
Hey,
with was
didn't you guys just launch your review of Pentium 4?
This was like 2 years ago at this point, I think.
I know, but it's still 20 years old. Or 15.
True. But
Doesn't this require an AVX2 base, your tests?
no,
Okay.
you can run on SSE. In theory, you could absolutely run it on Pentium 4.
Yeah.
It won't be very quick, but I think it does run.
April
And then
Fools.
code compilation.
Either that or Halloween. Sorry.
And then if you go down to the sort of last charts,
Yeah,
again,
Linux compile.
compilation, again, very branch heavy. Zen 5 is topping the charts.
Why
And
is Zen 4 down here? And how is Skylake so high?
honestly, I suspect it's because those branch predictors were just better tuned for compiling.
I'm pretty sure this is the era where how quickly your Linux compiled, 30 seconds
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
benchmark people were running a lot. And then you have
Yeah,
the missed branches per thousand instructions, or your
yeah.
branches taken
And
per thousand
and you can
instructions.
see AMD has massively reduced that with Zen 5.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
in
Zen 4 to
in
Zen 5, 7 to 4.5.
and in terms of actual IPC, and I mean actual IPC, we saw from about 10 to 25% improvement. That 25% was from if you scroll up, I think it's up. Yeah, it's up. It's definitely up. Or is it in the other article? It might be in the other article.
George has done a lot of,
Yes.
George and the team have done a lot of work on this.
Yes, and the articles are blurred in my head. Scroll down. Uh, down. It's
What's the
down where
title am I looking for?
uh SMT.
Yeah,
Down.
this one.
Down. No, down a bit more. down, I think, one more chart.
coverage.
Here it is.
IPC various workloads. Okay.
Yep. Yes. So if you noticed, so these are the tests that we were running. That Minecraft chunk gen, that's essentially a Java workload. So very popular workload for servers and just a general workload for like consumer like web browsers. Somebody on the Chips and Cheese team, Titanic Freak, Ryan, he saw a 20 to 25% increase in Java. And I mean strictly just instructions per clock. Which is insane for a jump without a clock speed boost. Because if he adds AVX, so this didn't actually involve AVX 512 in these numbers. If he adds AVX 512, it's more like 30 to 40%, if I remember correctly. It's utterly insane what it can do when it's given, when you, I hesitate to use the word optimize, but when the code allows for it. Now, speaking of code being allowed to do it, PC World, and well, AMD, but PC World has an article on it. Apparently,
so this is posted by Mark Hackman over at PC World. Follow his Twitter. I highly advise you all to do so, because he comes up with some of this stuff that's good, and he asks the right questions. So yeah, you haven't seen this article. I briefly saw it before, because this is the news that went out like 10 minutes before we went live. It's that the Ryzen 9000 family of processors are getting an update. It's going to be pushed through Windows Update for Windows 11 only, which apparently from an OS perspective improves the branch prediction performance.
Which does not surprise me, because in a lot of those 30-year-old articles I was reading about these different optimizations for the branch predictor, a lot of it talked about how software will have to be aware of some of this. So it is. This does not surprise me, and this probably is something trivial, like not trivial, but something like a 0.1% increase in branch prediction accuracy, and you're getting up to 13% from that. Like, again, I cannot stress how important branch prediction is. So
there's a graph here, or there's a set of data here. So you said something about this was meant to be pushed out with a 24H2 patch anyway.
I suspect that's what AMD was targeting, was this to be pushed out in 24H2. I'm not positive on that, but I do suspect that was supposed to be the case.
And they've just brought it forward.
Yeah.
So you can get this on the preview ring right now.
Yeah.
Or we expect it will come in the next week or two. It's funny how Mark's worded it here, because I think a lot of people might see it this way. They're calling it initiative update rather than a bug fix. Can you call it a bug if it's not yet been implemented? I think, to be honest, I think this is part of a wider discussion of how many of the core features require OS support, right? How effective, because we often look at this in a very holistic way. You have the core, you have the code. We don't often consider the running environment of that code, right? Because we assume that it shouldn't matter. The way the core decodes instructions, the way the core executes instructions, the way the buffers run should be orthogonal to the OS. But in reality, it's not, because the OS does its own optimization layer on top of it. The OS is a shim layer. It's a shim layer between the CPU and your code. But the thing is, as we know with shim layers, they like to funnel things down certain pipes and do some certain conversions and do on-the-fly optimizations that could actually kill performance. or you put flags in to tell it the right way of doing things. And this is essentially the flag that, because you have such a fundamental change in AMD's underlying microarchitecture, it makes sense for an OS that was built well before this architecture even existed or was even in the glint in somebody's eye or in a team's eye, that over time you have to do updates. That's why it's sometimes good to have a ground up redesign of your OS. I mean, otherwise we'd still be using, ZOS that was built for x87 instructions, right? And we can't use AVX2 because we're all living in the x87 world, even though it's all emulated these days anyway. So, it's a lot.
And what?
So one thing I think we should bring up as well, because we are going long on this.
Yeah.
Is I want to bring up your graph, hopefully without my system deciding that it's time to reset all my windows again. This one has been taking interest on the Twitter sphere within our small group, and I think it's great. It's important to speak about it on the Tech Poutine. This is inter-CCX communications.
Yes. So this
L3
is
to
inter
L3.
and intra. This is inter and intra.
L3 to
Basically
L3
communication.
band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's L3. It's within L3s into different L3s, right? And
let's explain what people are seeing here. And there might be people listening, so they can't see what we're seeing. What we do on this test, and by the way, I love the fact that when I started doing this test regularly, everybody's taken my color scheme as default. It's amazing. I was one of the first, if not the first, to do it. What you do is you take each individual thread or core, and you say, how long does it take to ping, to compare and exchange in the L3 of another core and get back, right? And what's the cycle time to do that? And generally inside the same silicon, you expect it to be semi-consistent. If we're dealing with rings and stuff, you'd expect to see some extrapolation as you go further away from the rings and what have you. The main thing it's testing here, though, is if you have to go off silicon to another piece of silicon, either across a socket in a multi-socket system or to a new chiplet on the same package. And you do see this hierarchy, right? Because it's better to keep stuff on one chip than it is to go off chip. And that's many power reasons and bandwidth reasons and latency reasons. And what we're testing here is latency. So when you're within one CCX, when you're within those 8 cores, when you're within those 16 threads, your latency is anywhere from 15 to 20 cycles, which is as expected.
This is a nanosecond.
Oh, this is nanosecond. Okay, so yeah, 15 to 20 nanoseconds, and that's expected, and it's very green on the graph just to show that it is such a low latency. Now, when you go off to the other chip, in the past, this has been somewhere in the region of 80 to 110 nanoseconds, maybe even 140 nanoseconds.
70 to about 90 is what my memory is remembering.
It changes from generation to generation because it's all about how you keep the coherency protocol and what exactly the point-to-point bandwidth is, and all the additional overhead. Maybe you've got memory encryption turned on and there's a little bit of additional latency into that, and you've got to do some checks to make sure you're not crossing security boundaries if you've got that turned on, that sort of thing. With Zen 5, and not unique to Zen 5, because to be honest, Orion kind of does this as well. The latency between CCXs is around 180 190, peaking at 200. And there have been a lot of questions as to why this is the case, especially because it was so good on Zen 4. Not only the question is, why is this the case, but what is the effect on performance, right? Because this is a synthetic test. This is what we're showing. This is a architectural discussion, not a performance discussion. So what is happening in the architecture of the SoC architecture, not the core architecture? What are there rules with how L3 snoops are being managed? It's with Ryan. So the guys at Anantech still run this test. I know George and the team at Chips and Cheese have their own test, which is basically the same. IDA has a test.
It's slightly different, but it's very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same principle, and even IDA now has the test. And I know Andreas Schilling at Hardware Lux, those guys run it as well. Part of it is even knowing the software has it. 2, can you write it yourself? And 3, is it actually worth your audience looking into it? But the thing is, everybody's getting roughly the same result.
Okay.
And the question is, why? Some people thought it's because one of the compare exchange instructions on Zen 5 is 35% slower. We've confirmed in all 3 of the tests we run, none of them use that instruction. They use a different compare instruction.
Yeah.
A change and compare instruction that it performs identically. So let's rule that out. Then what?
It's not the IOD because that stayed the same. So it's not how they're necessarily. It's not. They may have changed how they've done snooping They may have, but I don't find that very likely. I'll be honest. I don't quite know what's going on here, but I think the end answer or question is, how big of a performance difference does this make? And I'm going to say probably negligible. Like, honestly, probably nothing. Because you don't want... Yes, the latency is bad. Even on Zen 4, yes, it was 70 nanoseconds. Great. You still don't want to be doing that. And the amount of actual traffic that you see going from CCD 0 to CCD 1 on any Zen CPU is basically this. It's 0. So does this really matter? No, not really.
The thing is, if you do have a workload that does it, the minute all your cores are saturated, the additional latency is hidden.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Because that's how multiprocess...
But George, if it doesn't matter, why do we run this test at all?
You want to know why?
Because we like numbers.
Well, that
we're gluttons for punishment.
It's also because you ran it.
Let's blame everything on me.
But no, seriously, that's why we ran it, because we want to make our own version of this test. And but in the end, how performance is impacted by this, honestly.
The whole point when you tape out a chip and you do your validation is that you make sure the edge cases make sense, because you know that something's going to appear on the edge case at some point somewhere. The reason why we did this test initially is, 1, it's a point of differentiation. 2, we were getting multi-chip designs and we wanted to emphasize what the effect was going from one chiplet to another, and also one socket to another, right? Let's be honest, on the enterprise. It's a bit hard to do this test with 512 cores these days. It's a real pain in the butt. Yes.
It takes a very long time. Yeah. Trust, we've run this on Bergamo.
Yeah.
With S&T enabled. Yeah, trust me, it takes a long time.
Yeah. But it's also an indication if something's really wrong. Right?
Yeah.
And if you look at something like Meteor Lake with its 3 types of cores, you do see big differences between P cores, E cores, and low power E cores, right? The additional latency it takes to wake up. So maybe this is a sleep thing. Maybe the L3 is powered down so much to save power that the offshoot of this is that it takes additional latency when you need to wake it up.
Yeah.
Is the
There's
trade-off
so
worth
many
it?
different
It
reasons.
um, the so this is one thing we can put to Mike when we see him at
Yeah.
HotChips next week, and I, I could bet a good amount that they know we've been talking about this.
Oh, absolutely. Because I know for
I
a
would
fact
be,
that Ryan contacted AMD about this. Ryan and Andreas both.
yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's something that the engineers are worth speaking directly to about this. So it's not,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
um, it's the funny thing is Chris Jackson says, what's the point even of L3 hiding latency?
Yeah.
That's all it is.
And
L4 is even better. Well, no, it's worse because it's less effective, but it's good to have. And then let's
yeah.
have L5.
Yeah.
Yeah, trade-offs,
Yeah.
right?
Anyway,
Also,
it
power up, power down.
yeah. Um
There is
I
one
don't
thing I wanted to approach before we close out. Sorry, George, I'm going to butt in here.
it's fine.
And this is one of the best reviews I recommend people read. This is a guy that almost nobody knows about.
Okay, wait, hold on. Evo 007. No. No. AMD's L3 is not quote dog. If you that's what you think, then you really need to go read our review about it. Because in no way is AMD's L3 quote dog. And if that's what you think, then you're quite misinformed.
Don't,
Um
George, it's the internet. Don't take the bait.
I
Don't take the
know,
bait.
I know,
George,
but
it's the internet. Don't take the bait.
I know, but misinformation bugs me, right? And it's stuff like this where it's easily proven wrong, and people just don't.
Well, okay, no. I'll address what he says. In Ada latency, at least it was 2x. I know the guys at the team at Ida, right? They do a lot of good stuff. Being on time isn't always one. Having the most accurate test isn't always the other. But they have a lot of amazingly good tools when they're baked in, and I love them. Right? Don't take a synthetic test as a real world data point. A synthetic test is an architectural analysis, not a performance
And
analysis.
I can tell you from fact that Zen 5's L3 is 46 to 48 cycles. Zen 3's, which you mentioned, is 47 cycles. It's the same latency for all intents and purposes. Heck, it's a slight decrease in latency from Zen 5, which, if I remember correctly, was 50 cycles.
Let's talk
It,
about Alex's review.
yeah,
Come on,
yeah.
George, let's calm.
Yeah. No,
Let's
Alex did a very good breakdown of Zen 5 and AVX 512, and how AMD implemented it for Zen 5.
He also highlights you, me, and Chester for
Yeah.
helping him in this review. I think Alex is going to be here for HotChips. I don't think he
Yes, he
confirmed with
is.
me.
He,
Okay,
he is going to be there.
so Alex creates the software called Y-Cruncher, which is the pi calculation algorithm. He is a hand optimization specialist for high performance code. That's what he's done since he graduated. He's done it in the financial space. He's done it in the compute space. I can't remember if he's still on gardening leave or what. He's doing some consultancy work with performance specialists now as well. And he had some really deep insights into what Zen 5 did, especially because he was also one of the first to adopt AVX 512 back with Xeon Phi and everything else like that. So he knows what the benefits of having additional structures and structure sizes inside a chip can do to code, because he's dealt with codes that can essentially go through it. And so one of his big things is, I urge you to go read this. It's at numberworld.org /y-cruncher in his blogs. The website is terrible navigationally, trust me, but just search for Zen 5 AVX 512 teardown and more. It's very good. Let's see if we can drop a link in the chat. Yeah, there we go. So everybody can have a look at that. So this is a graph. This is a table that's important. It talks about what is the vector width of each core from Zen 4, Zen 5, and then a bunch of Intel chips in terms of bits per cycle. And the important thing to realize here is that because AVX 512 is in Granite Ridge on desktop is a full 512-bit data path, and there's 4 execution ports per core that can do it,
which is split between 2 FMAs and 2 FADs, which is how you get the 2048 bits.
Yeah, which is more than any other core put together. And you notice here that AMD's been fairly consistent. You either get 256-bit or 512-bit, whereas Intel's done this mix of some ports can do some ports can do the other. That makes it a little bit more complex. This section here is about how Zen 5C is different to Zen 5. I'm not going to touch about that today. And his big thing in this section is that you can double performance, but if you leave memory bandwidth the same, then suddenly you have to rewrite your code. Because the important thing here is this number. With Zen 5, you need to process 340 AVX 512 instructions per load in order to get latency and performance benefits and power benefits out of it. If you only do one instruction, there's no point. Go do two 256-bit instructions instead. But the thing is, this used to be 170, right?
Yeah.
So you don't get anything for free in this game. And so his argument here is that it's great it's been doubled, but if I'm running a memory-bound workload already, I get no benefit. What are most workloads today? Memory-bound. So that's where that comes into play.
Yeah.
And there's nice pretty graphs. Why were the Zen 5 IPC numbers all over the place? And I want to see if I can zoom in here. And it's this graph, right? Zen 4 to Zen 5, right? Scalar integer, 20 to 30%. x87.
We showed basically 20-25% in code compilation. So, right, we verified basically what Alex showed.
This x87 FPU doesn't matter much, so don't worry about that.
It does matter for financial institutions, and government. That's why they sped it up.
Yeah. Thing is, usually they try to the performance of that goes down because it's emulated more and more these days. SSE is actually a lot of game code is SSE optimized. Some of it is AVX, but not everything can be AVX accelerated. And then the big one is the full 512-bit AVX 512, and that's where you get the 2x IPC improvement. AMD, in their marketing materials, did not include any 512-bit workloads. Now, if you remember.
Yeah. Now, to talk about that regression in SSE performance. There
Yeah,
is a regression in integer SIMD performance latency. Integer SIMD latency from 1 cycle to 2 cycles. Now, this is seemingly a bug. Like, there was an
it
error, and
shouldn't.
in theory, it could do 1 cycle, but because of a hazard in the core, 99.99% of the code will be 2 cycles for integer SIMD latency. That is a bug. Now, there are plenty of bugs and plenty of silicon.
Yeah.
There's always, you can go and look up AMD's revision guides, right? Very interesting stuff if you want to look into what has workarounds and what doesn't. But this is probably why SSE does have a slight regression in performance.
And then we get onto the bit why a lot of people got mad, and why we keep telling people Cinebench is a shitty benchmark. It runs a set of instructions that are kind of used but aren't optimal. The other thing is that it just doesn't tax the core anymore. It taxes the cores, but not per core. And then CPU-Z is absolute trash. If you're running it, you have no idea what you're doing. Yeah. The meme being the person on the keyboard behind the screen.
So, yeah, a lot of benchmarks, and I mean the ones that you just hit, run on. And this also includes SpecInt. I've been trying to get SpecInt to work, but
really?
I'm kind of frustrated with it. Yeah, I'll talk to you later about it. But
yeah,
a lot of these workloads don't hit the branch unit. Hey, guess what AMD improved a lot with Zen 5? The branch unit.
Yeah. Which is why it's also always good to have a mixture of real world benchmarks. The thing is, you also have to know what the benchmark is testing.
Yeah.
And so many people don't know what Cinebench is testing or CPU-Z is testing.
And
trust me, the people who publish this data are really testing my patience.
But yeah, actually, what's this showing of CPU-Z here is really interesting because of the core vid drop, right? And I think Scatterbencher showed this. Showed that the high clocking CCD of his Zen 5 chip can hit 5 gigahertz at sub 1 volt. You know what that makes me really excited for? Turin. Because what clock speeds are they going to reach?
10 gigahertz.
It'll eat your heart out.
Yeah. No, but it's 5 gigahertz at sub 1 volt is insane.
Yeah.
Was that 1 core load or 8 core load?
That was all the cores.
Nice.
Sorry. No, that was 1 core. That was 1 core, but that shouldn't matter too much because
there's V-droop and other conservative things that they do to pull it back up. So, but for the future, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
So this is a leak. So speculation. Supposedly, the 96 core Turin part is going to clock up to 4.5 gigahertz on the boost clock, which is honestly, based on these numbers and Scatterbencher, I believe it. Like,
no,
absolute leak.
Threadripper.
Ooh, spicy.
What, don't say that. I've just upgraded. I've just upgraded my system.
Upgrade again.
Jesus Christ. Part of the reason why Alex has done this is, the clock speed really 5.7. It's because of a slight regression in Zen 4. They had to post a patch due to some things bugging out a little bit in the Igisa update. it was badly promoted at the time. It doesn't look good on AMD that they had to do it, but it just means that Zen 5 is fixed for what that issue was. And you could say AMD escaped a battering on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
This is
here's
also
where
quite
Alex
interesting.
yeah. So the short and curlies of this is that normally people are conditioned to think AVX 512 means reduced frequency because of the big power increase of running big vector units. And we saw with AMD and Zen 4 and the other architecture of the AVX 512 that because they didn't have a full 512-bit path, they didn't need to declock. And we see this here with Zen 4, that we only get the clock speed regression when we start loading up all the cores. When we start going from 32 threads and then 32 threads with the AVX 512, we're actually going below 5 gigahertz for this chip. With Zen 5, we do actually go below 4 gigahertz, but if you notice, the V core is also reduced. Why? Because you get a current increase. Running big vector units requires lots of current. So is this a regression in the clock speed of AVX 512? Because if you look, the current draw here, when you've only got 256-bit vector units, is less than 160. Or is it AMD essentially limiting how much current you can pull through your chip? The thing is, if you're happy, if you're happy pulling 250 amps through your chip, go be my guest. You will get your frequency.
Personally.
Yeah, so does AMD throttle with 512? The broad stroke answer here is yes, because the current is higher.
So there's a yes and a but here.
Yeah, the but is it isn't predetermined. It's only done when the current hits the limit. What Intel was doing is detecting the instruction and preemptively declocking.
Now he goes into this, but if you go to the Pharonics, because Pharonics actually looked into this, and he saw no clock speed difference. But he was also not running very hard AVX 512 workloads.
Yep.
Which wide cruncher is.
Yeah, Alex is hitting the limits of throughput here because he has a workload that can do it, and it's the workload that matters to him. It's not something that's going to happen to most people.
Okay, now this section, power transitions, is super interesting. And I'll boil this down to, because of how AMD does power transitions, using AVX 512 in small amounts is basically free. Whereas for Intel, because they were doing some preempting and they were
it was to avoid brownouts, essentially.
Yes. And in order to do that, for about 50,000 cycles, they would essentially pass the 512 instructions through the lower 128-bit of the execution pipe. So you were only getting essentially 1/4 of a 512-bit per cycle, as best as we can tell. That meant that AVX 512 was not free, right? You would pay a quite significant penalty to use it. So you better be using it for a lot of your time span. Whereas with AMD, go ahead.
Can I have a rant?
Go ahead.
There's no such thing as 1/4, it's a quarter. Run over. Yeah.
But yeah.
If anybody who has an opinion on that, put it down in the comments. I could argue until the cows come home. But the thing is, AMD doesn't have to do this, right? Because it's Intel is proactive, AMD is reactive, and that's what turbo tables are proactive, right? AMD doing the essentially power and energy aware frequency scaling, reactive, and it's played a bit. It's worked out well for them, but it's hard to do. So
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Alex's big thing here is that the when you move from a very basic workload to a very powerful workload, that is the biggest current change you can do. Almost bigger than idle jump, right? So the question is, if your code is, massive 512-bit floating point, and then scalar integer, 512-bit floating point, scalar integer, that's when you're going to get the biggest transition. Do you see this 50,000 cycle latency? And Alex said no in his testing. He said it's almost, because he does see something like a 50 cycle delay on the most extreme transition. The thing is, that transition is rare. And what Alex is doing here is he's doing 10 seconds of scalar integer, then 10 seconds of 512-bit floating point. Right, so...
Yeah. And 50 cycles is nothing. It's 3 orders of magnitude less than the 50,000 that we were talking about before. So
I know, but
how much does that
point
really
is,
matter?
most code doesn't do scale integer
No.
on one instruction, then 512-bit floating point on the next, then scale integer. Then, if you're doing that, then unroll your damn loop.
Yeah.
But he's also going from, I think, all 4 execution ports.
Yeah, he's
right,
hitting
as
all
well.
4. So both FMAs and FADs, which is very intensive, right?
It's
And
he also goes through the useful numbers for developers here. The key difference is throughput of all 512 bits instructions doubled up. We know that from the data path. And then to your point here, latency of all 1 cycle SIMD instructions has regressed to 2 cycles, and that's where that -1% comes in. It's a trade-off. I wonder if this is done for power reasons. This isn't something AMD highlighted in the talk.
I don't
so
think it. I think it's absolutely. If you scroll down a bit, you'll see that's a bug. It's not intended behavior.
But is it a bug that can be fixed?
You would need to respin it. Probably. Let me put it to you this way. I 100% believe that in Zen 6 it will be 1 cycle again.
Yeah.
Or at least this bug will not be there, right? Now.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to go here? Because there's one last thing that I want to cover.
It's desktop versus mobile differences. So he did find that there were some desktop versus mobile. So mobile being Strix Point, desktop being Granite Ridge. I think the here is that the floating point add is a fixed latency regardless. In desktop, there are some instances where you can take a 2-cycle path, depending on the instruction flow. And then it has only a 256-bit data path, so it acts like Zen 4. Yeah, we already knew that.
That was already known.
And he does say that there are some IDA instructions that aren't properly implemented if you use the IDA instruction thing. I showed Alex how to use that, got him the latest version, because that's what we used at Anantech, and you pinged people like Alex saying, what do you see in here that doesn't make sense? And it's like the Hygon processors that had the really bad RD RAND and RD seed type things. Yeah.
And to your point, DS, yes, it is errata. My bad.
Yeah. DS was asking, can we call it errata? Lol, it can't be fixed in place. Yeah. And then he goes into the vector unit teardowns. I'll let other people go into this. It's very detailed. It's very interesting. Alex talks through a lot of his
this part I found hilarious. VP2 intersect. how
Um,
they got it. Eh,
so for people who don't know, VP2 intersect is one variant of AVX512. It's a family, right? It's a set. VP2 intersect on Intel appeared on Tiger Lake only, and then got shafted because it turns out you could do the same thing with other instructions faster. So Intel killed it, saying, well, there's no need to use it if you can do it faster elsewhere, so we're not even going to support it again. Lo and behold, AMD sticks it in Zen 5, and it's actually really good.
it's really good, which I find absolutely hilarious.
Um, yeah, it's so Intel's version was 25 cycles per instruction, and I think the optimized non-VP2 insect was something
I think it
around
was
16.
I think it was 12.
But the
12 or
point
14.
it required more than one instruction, so you technically have the potential for a dependency chain coming in and messing things up, or reorder buffer coming and screwing things up. AMD adds it to Zen 5, and it's just one cycle. Win.
Yeah, it's
Whoever built that needs a goddamn medal.
absolutely. It's
Um,
hilarious.
so the thing is, what is VP2 intersect used for? Bugger all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's utterly disgusting as an actual instruction, but
Yeah.
it's hilarious that AMD pulled that off, right?
We can do AVX512 better than you. We can
Yeah,
implement this instruction better than you.
yeah.
Uh,
But yeah. So I think the last thing that I really want to cover, and there are, if you want to talk about any core, but I'll use Zen 5 here because it's here. If you want to talk about a core, it the way, in my opinion, to do it is, okay, you can talk about performance and all that, great. But to me, what's always more interesting is what are the bottlenecks? And I don't, right, Alex covered one, memory bandwidth, right? Memory
mhm.
bandwidth is on all consumer CPUs today is quite,
And
I
it's
would
and
like
it,
more.
one, it's getting worse, and two, the only way to make
Uh-huh.
it better is have fewer cores. Lunar
Yeah.
Lake.
Yeah.
Lunar Lake has the best consumer desktop x86 core to memory bandwidth ratio. Prove me wrong.
True. Well, okay. Two core Alder Lakes. But yes, memory bandwidth is a big struggle for these big 16, 24 core chips. But another thing is, I'm going to, because it's fresh in my head, Zen 5, what are they going to improve on for Zen 6 in the core? Integer registers, number of them. They're almost certainly going to increase that because that's a new bottleneck that Zen 5 has versus Zen 4. And that's because they
Mhm.
made the core wider. Something else, potentially increase these integer the ALU and AGU scheduler sizes, or potentially put an NSQ, a non-scheduling queue, in front of the AGU schedulers. Now, what the ALU scheduler is exactly what it is. It's the integer scheduler. It's where all the basic math of, like, say, 2 plus 2 or 3 times 3 goes through. In the AGUs, it's for memory. That's all your memory accesses, your loads, and your stores. And again, in Zen 5, that's a new bottleneck that has appeared. And they've considerably reworked that part of the core for Zen 5. In Zen 3 and 4, you had 4 schedulers, 3 of which, 4 shared schedulers on the integer side, 3 of which were also used for memory, with the 4th one being strictly for integer operations. With Zen 5, they've moved to one strictly for integer operations and one strictly for memory operations. I expect that layout to be much improved in Zen 6. But that's something that you can only do once the architecture has been out, so to speak. You have to run these tests and figure this out, right? And this is not simple stuff. This is very, very complicated stuff to do.
Even though
How
we
do you
call it low-hanging
balance?
fruit.
Yeah. Even though we call it low-hanging fruit, it's only low-hanging because we can easily see it. But let's say you fix that. Let's say you add double the number of registers and double the integer scheduler entries and all that. You're going to find a bottleneck somewhere else. So this stuff is very complicated. And you're always going to be bottlenecked somewhere. And some of that's going to be easier to fix, and other parts are going to be harder to fix. And that's just how this stuff goes. It's all about trade-offs. Yeah.
The one thing I want is more PCIe lanes.
I agree. I want more PCIe lanes. If anyone from AMD is listening to this, add more PCIe lanes, please.
Yeah, it's we'll be on AM5 for a while. The I highly recommend going to read Alex's stuff. Again, I'll put a link in the description. I do want to highlight one thing that Davina said. Faster lanes, problem solved. Funny enough, I have a video with synopsis about PCIe 7. It's already on LinkedIn. We're going to post it to the channel hopefully later this week. Need to sort that out. So PCIe 7 is the future. No, actually, I tell a lie. We don't need faster lanes. We need storage drives that only require one lane.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, with PCIe 5, we could already do 2 lanes. Like, we really don't need 4 anymore.
No, and it saves power.
Yeah.
The only downside is bifurcation. Intel CPUs aren't that good at bifurcating down to by 2.
I mean, that just sounds like an Intel skill issue.
Get good, scrub. It's we'll see.
Yeah.
So that is Zen 5. Talking about some of the reviews we've seen. George has data. I highly recommend Alex's review. It's if you want an X3D, go get an X3D. For AMD, this is about redefining the baseline. Pushing the needle gets easier when you have a better implement to push it with. Thing is, you got to take time to change the implement, and this is the implement change.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking forward to what that means going forward. I do wish Windows was better equipped to deal with lots of CPUs, lots of CPU cores. Yeah, there are lots of things we want. You may get to a point where you're sticking an AI chip in with your CPU and your GPU. This is the Tens Torrent wormhole card. Buy it now for $1,000. Ooh, I don't get paid commission. Oh crap. For people who didn't catch the intro, I'm actually here at Tens Torrent's office just because I did a bunch of I had a bunch of meetings with them yesterday. They're a client of mine. They're not paying for this sponsorship.
What's funny is I have a 10-story cup that Bob gave me. I should have had it as my coffee cup, but I wasn't thinking that far ahead.
The thing is,
my
your
quiz
cup says
prediction
ho
failed.
ho. Your cup says ho ho ho. In the thumbnail of this video, I'm wearing my Christmas jumper. So, I do want to move over to some Q&A because we're coming to the end of the stream, and let's highlight this another super chat from Jose Orozco for a couple of bucks. Thank you, Jose. He says, update on NVIDIA's CUDA moat, Rock'em competitive. I can tell that Jose is an investor because he's written NVDA.
Yeah.
Jose, this is a question I get quite a lot from my consultancy clients. You should get in contact with me and let's set up a call. I can talk to you about the moat and the competitiveness and what customers are saying. General broad strokes, it is still a moat. It's hard for upcomers to come in. Turns out a lot of deep companies are hand tuning their code anyway, so they don't need CUDA.
And I've said this on my end. I've said this publicly. Rock'em, where it was 12 months ago, is night and day to where it is now. For our MI300X article, it was basically once we got the correct version of VLLM, which is true for NVIDIA as well. You just have to find the correct one. And by correct, I mean the ones with all the right upstreams for your new architecture and stuff. It was basically get up and go. So
it's Brian does ask, where is Keller? Well, I was hoping he would crash the stream. Me too. The funny thing is, it's currently 7 p.m. I don't know if I'm the last one left in the Tens Torrent office right now. No, Bob may be listening in.
Oh no, he's here. He's here.
This has gone on maybe like an hour longer than we assumed. I know Jim's been meeting with the investors today because I met with a couple of them as well. So Brian says raid the R&D lab. We'll see.
Steal some of those RISC-V chips and send them to me.
You keep stuff going. I'll see if I can find something.
So yeah. Okay. Here's DS. DS's question: Where proper scheduling for Zen's numerous heterogeneous core layouts for consumer? The answer is it doesn't actually behave any differently. So Strix doesn't behave any differently to like dual CCD desktop in terms of how the scheduler behaves. Other than the scheduler will try and prioritize the C cores as much as possible. Otherwise, it basically appears identically. Oh, fun. Oh, really fun. Okay.
No, it's not really fun. It's why have I got a feeling that this is studio effects being really annoying? Yeah, it is. You can't see that, can you?
No, I can't.
This is Jawbridge. This is Tens Torrent's very first test chiplet.
Like I said, very fun.
A0 2019 week 4. So this is over 5.5 years old.
Yeah, I would disagree with you on that, DS. You don't want to cross CCXs anyway. And at that point, if you're having to do a context switch, your fabric is not going to be your bottleneck there. If you're having to move stuff over to your Z.
Is this Ghostbusters? Don't cross the CCXs.
But yeah.
Actually, George might be a bit too young to get that reference.
No, I do. I do. Also, the guild does not take orders from you. Um, do 1984.
Cineo asks, are there a chance of consumers getting more than dual channel ever? Um, Technically, DDR5 is more than dual channel. It's technically quad channel. But the
But
problem is, um, the question should be more, is there a chance of consumer getting more than one 28-bit memory controller? And the answer is probably not. Because,
I would disagree.
what, Lunar Lake?
Nope, nope, nope. LPDDR6. They're
No,
changing. They're changing channel sizes, so they're going from 16-bit to 24-bit because of how they're. So I actually do suspect that in the future, in the very near future, we're going to see 192-bit memory buses, which I think is quite neat. And that's
you'll go,
because of how they're changing bit bit length and byte length and all that fun stuff.
it'll be 96, cost down
No, it won't.
to
It
screw
won't
you
be
off.
96.
Um,
Uh, uh,
so the problem is that memory standards have to support at least 2 DPC or 64 bits per channel, um, because that's what enterprise requires. We all thought with DDR5, the need for 2 DPC and the fact that chips were coming out with 8, 10, 12 memory channels, 12 64-bit memory channels, would make the need for 2 DPC to go away. Unfortunately, AI came along, and it turns out you need servers with lots of DRAM to screw you over. On top of that, the memory capacity for consumer modules has grown faster than people expected. Part of that is due to demand, part of that is due to technology. The fact that you can now, with a dual channel system, integrate 192 gigabytes of memory is more than enough for 99.5% of people with a computer. If you could argue that the first thing they'll do is take away 2 DPC. So you still got 2 channels, and you can still put 96 gigs of memory. Or with 96 gig module or 64 gig modules in the future, you can do 128. The only hope is that there is a cost down high-end desktop. Unfortunately, the way companies have implemented that with, say, is it the W2400 series?
the W2400 series and the standard 7000 series Threadripper from AMD.
Yeah, it's a cut down 8-channel to 4-channel part, and it's still massively expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So, as much as we would all like an X58 revival, something where you can buy an i7 920 for $250, a motherboard for about 200 to 250, and triple channel memory would be amazing. Does anybody want to do it? No. Do I have more to say about this perhaps in the next couple of weeks? Yes, but it's nothing that you would like. But good question. I like that question actually. It's not
I
something I've addressed recently, but yes.
I really want more memory bandwidth because I think that is starting to bite things in the back end. If you get what I mean, like let's say this had double the memory bandwidth, then the iGPU on this thing would be much more performant, as an example.
So, do you think a standard like CAM2 or LP CAM2 could push in that direction?
Yes, because it's simpler. So, because of how CAM works, I actually think it will sort of push towards more.
It simplifies the R&D to put
Yeah,
in the traces.
yeah, but there's also sort of the other part, which is the on the silicon part, the physical PHYs that are still,
Mm.
because they're analog, they don't scale with N5, N3. They don't really scale much. There is some scaling, but it's tiny. It's like 10%.
Which is why you need to wait for new standards to come along to redefine what is needed.
Yeah.
Which is where we get DDR4, DDR5.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, I
yeah.
really do hope that AMD, Intel, they move forward with bigger memory subsystems. I really, really want to see that happen.
Okay, George, I propose to you MCR DIMM for consumer.
I would actually like that a lot. MCR DIMMs for
So,
consumers would be smart, in my opinion.
explain MCR DIMM for people who don't know what it is.
So, MCR DIMMs, for all intents and purposes, is sticking two DIMMs into a single DIMM. And what I mean by that is you basically have one DIMM that is functioning essentially as two different DIMMs. It's more complicated than that, but
1 equals 2, got you.
Barnard Tarski. It's Barnard Tarski. But yeah, it's if we had MCR DIMMs where essentially you on consumer, that would be great because you could have essentially double pumped. Yeah, I'm gonna get shit for that in the comments.
No, you get shit from that from me, but yeah.
Yeah, memory bus. That's not how it works at all because really, it's you're passing a bigger cache. Yeah,
It's not 2 DPC.
no, it's different.
But the end result is you get a big increase in memory bandwidth because of the effective frequency increase that you can run the memory at. You still have to have high-speed memory that supports it and what have you. And it's going to be a game changer on servers, depending on the availability of the modules themselves. Chance of it coming to consumer?
Yeah,
Because it's RDIMMs, it's registered ECC stuff right now. And the fact that DDR5 changed the pin output as well really annoyed people. So
I really, really hope. Can we just get like a non-RDIMM version of MC DIMMs? Like, please, because
MCR.
that would be great. Yeah, well, it's in the name, isn't it? MCR DIMMs. Just give me MC DIMMs.
Oh, yes, of course. For some reason in my mind, I was thinking MCR DIMM, but that's because I went to a university where MCR was middle common room, and you had an SCR that was senior common room. So now you've got me thinking MCR DIMM. I mean,
yeah, well, that's what it is.
So when we do a rap battle, I'm going to be MCR DIMM. Can such as do. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm old. Would we perhaps? So Solid Reactor asks, would we perhaps go towards CAM2 for high bandwidth memory and speed? Or high memory bandwidth? Okay, for speed, and CXL for additional capacity. CXL in consumer isn't going to be a thing. If they're not adding PCIe lanes, they're not adding CXL support. What CXL is useful for is nothing consumer related. As much as we would like it to be. And you can bet your bottom dollar anybody doing CXL compatible hardware is going to have a cost overhead, an add-on cost to build that, which is it's absorbed in enterprise world. It's not in consumer world. In consumer world, people argue over 1/10 of a cent because you use the yellow cap rather than the blue cap on your VGA port.
Yeah.
Oh, that used to be a serious thing. So, yeah.
Well, and sort of Yeah, go ahead.
You take this question from Brian because I have an opinion on
So,
it.
so Brian says, quote, for Ian, Alex and George published such great articles. Do you think it's worth it these days to submit an article to an academic journal versus just publishing investigations on a blog and or YouTube? End quote.
So the thing is, there's publishing to a journal and there's publishing to an archive versus publishing on GitHub to make it look like it's published to a journal. I've had to deal in some way with all three today, which is interesting. The academic journals are just talking about moving the needle forward. Us testing an architecture is not moving the needle forward. It's testing what's there. It's almost like a literature review, right? Nobody publishes an academic journal about the latest Bluetooth speaker, because what's the point? You have to speak about how Bluetooth speak power is affecting something or other, because you're providing data into the world. The whole point about academic paper implementation, I've just realized this is massive, is that the way I look at it is one news item on a Nantech when I just started out got more views than all of my research papers in my PhD combined. Right? Now, if you're implementing something new on a piece of hardware, that could be considered, let's publish it to at least an online journal or an archive or whatever. Bear in mind, academic journals you have to pay. You submit a paper and you have to pay for the
And then you have to
approval
pay to
process.
access it.
And then your institution may not even have access. The whole academic publishing game is a scam.
Yeah.
We know this. I'm a chemist. George is a physicist. Lots of people in here have experience with that. It's great when you have a universal license, but I think Oxford Chemistry only had 8 licenses for the whole department. So if more than 8 people were accessing it at one time, you couldn't access it. And Kickout was 10 minutes idle. So actually, I wonder if I can bring up a paper. And this is just because it's front of mind.
While you bring that up, I'll answer another question. Jose,
No. I've got it.
Okay.
So this is a paper that came out a month ago now. Attention in SRAM on tensor grayscale. So this is an individual who's got the hardware. He's said this. Let me see if I can do this. Hang on, let me take that banner down so it's easy to see. And this could have just been a GitHub thing, right? But he's actually pushed it to archive in under the subject of machine learning, so people can cite it. And if you look at the PDF, and this is actually a really good paper. It talks about how the compute kernel is run. It says RISC-V cores, but again, I'm going to argue that. It talks about software. It gives you a brief overview. This is really dry stuff for an article online, right? For an Antec, for Chips and Cheese, for my More Than More newsletter. You write for a journal in such a way that it's designed to captivate people, to make them keep reading. The point of a journal is to be thorough. I mean, thorough to the point of dry.
Mm-hmm.
There's no room for humor.
Yeah.
There is sometimes, depending on who is analyzing it.
It's much more limited than.
You also have to show you've done a literature review of what's gone on, right? And that's what the references are. I think the one thing that general blogs and newsletters can take away online, YouTube especially, right, is putting a list of resources used and references at the bottom. The thing is, there's no standard way to do that. At least with research papers, there are standard ways to do that.
Oh
I mean,
wait, we're actually
even
mentioned.
yes,
I just realized
yeah,
that.
yeah. Number 11 here, chips and cheese,
Mhm.
the H100. Yeah, and the guy who wrote this actually follows us on Twitter anyway, so he said he really liked our content. So this is fun, but the amount of people who will see this compared to an article, compared to say a video that's going to get 20,000 views, or this podcast that is I think we're currently around 140 right now. It's going to get a couple of thousand while we're showing it, and then a few more thousand over the next few days, versus a research paper with 120 views lifetime that I've paid to publish. It's you have to be in that frame of mind and have that relevant data, right? Quite apart from which, chips and cheese is a 501c3, right? There could be scope for, say, looking at the open source benchmarking suite, putting that into a paper to talk about how it works, and then publishing that on archive, right? But these sort of semi self-published things aren't seen in the same light as a true journal paper, even though it looks very similar. It's yeah. It's an interesting debate, just because published research is typically considered more respected. However,
Rigorous and
also for our environment, right? In a research environment, when I did my PhD, people were expected to maybe do 1 or 2 papers during the study, during the 3 years. I know in the US it's 5 to 7. Over here it's 3, because we don't do any of that extra teaching crap, unless we want to. And the whole point is you do the research, and then your thesis defense is basically prove that your research is publishable. If we're doing Zen 5 review this week, and then MI300X review next week, then Ampere 1 review next week, yeah, you have to be a lot more effective with the web word or the video than you can do with a vastly manicured paper. Now, could there be a service that does this automatically? Maybe. Do I think a lot of academics will get really pissed off if journalists, press, analysts like us start publishing papers like that? Yeah. Yeah, because we're not aligned with an institution, right? The institution is our business. Or I think, I guess, chips and cheese is in a more unique situation, being a 501c3, and the fact that a lot of people in our industry aren't that.
Yeah, it's a bit more unique, but I would absolutely still get pushback from folks saying you're not a real institution, which is a subject I don't
This
even want to get
motherfucker.
into.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, there was
Yeah.
one sort of a follow-up to Jose's question. What was it? Do you think NVIDIA will quit NVLink in favor of Ultra Ethernet? What's funny was Ian and I were discussing this just before the we went live, but NVIDIA actually joined the Ultra Ethernet consortium like 1 or 2 days ago, very very recent.
Yeah.
But
It's, to be honest,
Ultra Ethernet is not a competitor to NVLink. Ultra Ethernet is the competitor to InfiniBand.
InfiniBand.
The competitor to NVLink is UA-Link, which NVIDIA is not a part of.
And people forget the fact that NVIDIA does have an Ethernet-based solution. It's called Bluefield on the NICs and Spectrum-X on the switches. And they do a lot of business. Because there are people who do want NVIDIA, but don't want InfiniBand. they do tend to buy Bluefield and Spectrum X. There are some places that will say, no, we've been using Intel for our networking for 20 years. We're going to stick with Intel. And NVIDIA has to go support that, by offering the expansion boards out that do all that. I actually had a call about this today. It's very top of mind. Though it's NVIDIA's making more money on Ethernet than Intel is making on AI.
Which is kind of depressing.
So, yeah. NVIDIA's Ethernet switch business last quarter was just shy of $1 billion,
3 billion?
maybe a bit more.
No, I thought it was 3 billion.
That was all their networking. I'm talking about their Ethernet stuff.
Okay.
Maybe you're right, mate. Maybe it's 3 in 1 versus Ethernet and Mellanox, Ethernet and InfiniBand. And Intel is expecting $1 billion of revenue for the entire year for Gaudi.
No, it's 500 million. But that's only really Q4.
No,
so it's
no,
1 billion.
That 1 billion for the year, for the financial year. Oh no, sorry, for the calendar year, $1 billion.
I thought it was. Oh no, I'm thinking Gaudi 3, which is 500 million, not including Gaudi 2.
Gaudi 2, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My bad.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, no, they just integrated the business. So, NVIDIA should just join everything.
Yeah, that's what they've tried. And yeah.
Well, no. It says I think I pushed this argument last week. If you've got 10 companies in the room, and one of those companies has 95% of the market, the other 9 will gang up on the one.
Yeah.
Right. That's what UA Link is.
Yeah. And that's also what Ultra Ethernet was until NVIDIA joined, because they kind of don't have a choice.
Yeah. To be honest, one of NVIDIA's problems right now is the fact that because a lot of their employees could retire.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So sort of top of mind, because it came up, and a lot of people are confused about this. Quick, 2 minutes on the ZT Systems buyout by AMD.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of it?
So, for those who don't know, AMD just acquired a company called ZT Systems for their data center infrastructure and rollout business. Was it 4.9 billion? 5 billion?
4.9 billion. 4.9.
Yeah, which I believe in AMD's history is their second or third biggest ever acquisition, behind Xilinx and ATI.
I think it's their third.
It's what was ATI acquired by AMD?
I think it was
what was the
8 or
5.4 billion?
Oh, wow. Okay.
5.4. So this is very slightly smaller than the ATI. Now, don't get 2006 versus 2024 and inflation and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that AMD's acquired multiple software companies of late. We've got Nod.ai, we've got Mipsology, we've got Silo.ai. Combined, I think, is less than a couple billion, right? Maybe even less than 1.5. So this being 3x that, or 2.5x that, for a company whose business is optimizing data center infrastructure and rollout, confused a lot of people. But then again, we were also really confused with the Pensando acquisition. People really were confused with Xilinx, saying there's very little that's complementary in those businesses. And that's actually worked out quite well for them, as in they didn't screw it up like Intel did with Altera. So
yeah,
it's yeah, so part of the annoying thing is it may have even been today they were doing a call to answer questions from the analyst community about it,
Mm-hmm.
probably in an off the record conversation anyway. And actually, no, or it might be tomorrow when I'm right in the middle of doing a bunch of other stuff. So people do have questions. Did you tune in to they actually did a broadcast about it yesterday, I think.
No,
Um,
I didn't have the opportunity to tune in, but I know that again, Moorhead got this. So, but apparently AMD is not going to be doing like a DGX competitor.
mm.
They, which I think is a bit of a miss on AMD's part, but I suspect what they're going to do is that they're going to do like DGX, but partnered with, say, Dell or Supermicro or HPE, right?
So HGX.
Yes. Basically, I think it's going to be like an HGX, yeah.
So they already have their Radeon compute platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is like a Quanta based. A Quanta's the ODM,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
right? And you just buy that, and it's like a very just simple plug-in. But it's like predetermined by AMD what everything goes into it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how you buy it. The thing is, Nvidia's DGX business versus their HGX business. The HGX business revenue is like 8-1, 10-1. Most people buy HGXs,
Oh, interesting.
not DGXs. It's another reason why
Hmm.
Supermicro revenue has just gone whack, right,
Yeah.
in recent, and
Well,
everybody
I'm
loves
pretty sure that
Supermicro.
DGX is Supermicro.
No, it's WeWin, I think. It's one of the Chinese ones.
Okay.
I think Supermicro is the biggest deployer of HGX systems.
Mm, okay.
It's something like that. So it's but yeah, so going into the HGX like market, to be honest, I thought they were already there, right?
They're not quite
Because,
there.
because well, it's because you have the OEM form factor and the universal baseboard sort of
Hmm.
design, right? It's all meant to be OCP compliant anyway. So unless this company's going to go working with those OEMs to help build AMD into that competitive product. The thing is, I thought AMD's limiting factor was just simply the amount of chips they can get out. So isn't that limitation anyway?
I don't think that's not what Lisa said. Lisa said that they can make the chips, but they need customers. They
I,
can
I
make more chips than they can sell at the moment, which is weird to say for AI. But even
no, I'm
Nvidia,
pretty
if
sure in
you've
the previous
noticed,
call they like saying they're not limited on supply, and they keep upping their revenue numbers based on customer demand. But they're not
uh-huh,
saying if that number is increasing due to units or due to the fact that it's their ability to price higher.
I think it's the former.
You would assume based on what's been said. However, that opening hasn't been closed, right? And we all know CoOS.
Not just what AMD has said.
We all know that CoOS is limited globally.
Yes.
However many units a year. I think their prediction was like 1.2 million
Yeah.
CoOS this year, and it's going to go up another 60% next year. And then we've got Blackwell is using CoOS L,
Mm-hmm.
which is a different type of technology as well. The question is how much of the CoOS S availability
Near
does that
zero.
eat up?
Near
You
zero.
sure?
Yes. It's
That
it's it's it's
so
more
there's
like,
no.
so CoWoS L is like EMIB.
No, I know, but I'm wondering if there's an amount of tooling or testing.
Oh, I don't know if the tooling is the same. The testing is probably similar. but I
Right,
think the tooling might have to be different.
because the bottleneck of CoWoS S was never how many substrates they can make, right? Because it's basically bare silicon with a few connections in it.
Yeah.
That's piss easy to make. The point is
Yeah.
putting it together, doing the test, making sure it yields, and having the end-to-end solution. So I'm pretty sure CoWoS L is a lot more complex mechanically,
Yes.
right? So there is a little bit of overhead there, but I'm pretty sure on the back end, the test is very similar. So we'll have to wait until we hear more coming out. TSMC does have a packaging conference in September. It looks like we may be doing another sponsored video with them on that conference. We're just we're talking with each other exactly what it's going to be. It might be like half a one, which may not. I'm debating how interesting that would be, or it could be two really interesting ones, but it depends on a couple of people. You may have seen the guy that I interviewed last time, Kevin Zhang, at their tech symposium. So we may get another interview with him very quickly after speaking about packaging. I like Kevin; he is technical, and he orates well. The key question when I asked him, "Do you care about Moore's law?" he says, "I don't care." So it's with TSMC's event. We hope they're also going to start speaking about glass as well.
And just the last thing on ZT systems. What's interesting is that they're doing design, and I don't think AMD has actually strictly ruled out doing a NVL like competitor for something like.
Well, they last AI event they brought out Broadcom, Arista, and one of the others, and they said, this is going to be an Infinity Fabric switch. It's going to be, they're opening it up so anybody can do it, but obviously AMD is going to be taking the lead, just like technically Thunderbolt is open. You know what I mean? So having top of rack Infinity switches, but perhaps having dedicated, that's what that announcement was down. Let's do an NVLink competitor with Infinity Fabric.
No, NVL. So the big sort of NVL 72, NVL.
No, I know, but NVL uses NVLink internally. That's what I'm saying.
Yes. Okay.
So Infinity Fabric, from what AMD's shown, all they're showing is either CPU to GPU or GPU to GPU. Not here's a dedicated piece of silicon that you can put all these Infinity Fabric connections in and we can mux them and we can make them go out like a proper switch. That's what they're implementing with Broadcom and Arista. So
in I think personal opinion here. MI 400 I think is personally I think we're going to see the GPU and APU lines get merged, and it's just going to be an APU, and you're going to stick 4 of them into a server like NVL, and you're going to have, like, say 96 of them or whatever number. That I could see.
I kind of disagree, and that's just because the 300A feels dead.
300A was very, very evidently a DOE thing. It was made basically by the DOE for the DOE. However,
they made no attempt to push it beyond because they could get more money out of the X.
Yes.
With limited supply.
But I think with MI 400, look at what NVIDIA did with NVL, right? They have a Grace CPU, powering 2 Blackwells, right?
Hmm.
Well, what if you can just remove Grace and you just have it on the chip?
Then I'm spending power supporting something that could be off chip.
Well, you're going to spend that power anyway. That power is
I
zero sum.
know. No, it's not the fact that it's zero sum, it's the proximity. I have a limited amount of power per package. I don't want to spend that power in that package doing CPU things when I have a limited overhead by having it off package. Also, having that CPU off package means that I can have a memory controller off package and dump multiple terabytes of very fast memory for that system to use. Lots of people have said that Grace is a very expensive memory controller.
Well, that's all it is. I would argue it's not even a very good one. But that's my own opinion. I'm sorry, but 480 gigabytes for covering what 384 gigabytes of HBM between the two. Just to me, it doesn't make sense.
Maybe it's built for a customer.
Who? Like I don't see it personally. It doesn't make sense to me, but what do I know? I'm not at NVIDIA. I don't.
George, where's your 28 billion revenue this quarter? Hello, McFly. Hello.
It's over on Earth number 42.
Oh yeah. So we're actually approaching 3.5 hours for Tech Poutine number 3 since we went live. Let's. Are we trending our Tech Poutines to Nvidia stock price? Let's not do this. Next week we are scheduling. If you weren't here at the beginning, don't worry. We're being idiots for going this long. Rivaling Linus's show, the WAN show. Next week we will have a Tech Poutine. We are doing it from a studio. We will be in person together because it's HotChips. And we're going to title that show essentially the HotChips debrief. And if you think it took us a long time to get through just simply the titles of the talks, you can imagine how long it's going to take for us to get through our analysis of the talks. Even though we only technically have, say, 3 hours because George has a flight to catch. We'll see if we can get a guest on to get some interesting gravy debate for the Tech Poutine. Who that guest will be will depending on who's available. I've got a couple of people in mind that hopefully a lot of you will know. We're really looking forward to Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I know some of this audience are based in the Bay Area. If you are heading out to HotChips, please do say hello. And then when I need to run to my seat to the next talk, get the hell out of my way. No, I'm very nice, honest. It's we haven't necessarily planned, say, like a Tech Poutine dinner for people to join and whatever, mainly because my clients have decided they want to do stuff in the evening. So I'll be going to some of those. But yeah, no, happy to have a chat with anybody, speak about the biz, speak about what we think. As you can tell, we're both very opinionated.
Indeed.
You know, George has 1/4 of the opinions we've established. Sorry, gonna bash you on that one.
You're gonna be quartered soon.
Yeah, very good. But with that, I'm gonna take my chips and leave. This is the Tech Poutine, episode 3. My name is Potato. This guy is.
And I am Cheese.
And we'll catch you in the next one. Sorry, I did cut you off. Go on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I have dinner waiting for me downstairs, and I can smell it from here, so I'm starving.
It's almost 8 p.m. I'm pretty sure I am the last person in Tense Torrent office. We'll have a look.
Yeah, probably.
Thanks, everyone. Good
But
to see
yeah.
you all again. And we'll see you next week, Wednesday morning, probably around 9 a.m. Pacific. That's the 28th.
Mm-hmm.